The Forgotten Cabin. Ethan Cole stood at the fence line where his property disappeared into wild brush, staring at a barefoot child who shouldn't exist. She was maybe 6 years old, dirt-smudged and fearless, with eyes too knowing for someone so small. "You look sad," she said, tilting her head. "Want to meet my mommy?" The question hit him like a fist to the chest. There was no one living on his land. There hadn't been for years. But the girl was already walking away, glancing back with the kind of certainty that makes grown men follow. And God help him, he did. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay with me until the end. You won't regret it. The Montana sky stretched endless and indifferent above Ethan Cole's land, the kind of blue that made a man feel small, and the kind of silence that made him feel smaller. He'd bought this spread 6 years ago with money that still felt blood warm in his hands, inheritance from a father he'd barely known and a brother he'd loved too much. The land was supposed to mean something, a fresh start, a place to build the life that had been stolen from him in a single night of bad road and worse luck. Instead, it had become a tomb he walked through every day. The ranch house sat like a broken tooth against the horizon, its paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. Ethan had stopped noticing. He rose before dawn, worked until his hands bled, fell into bed too tired to dream, and started again the next day. The cattle knew his silence. The horses had learned not to expect kindness, only consistency. And the town, Coldwater, population 400 and dropping, had learned to leave him alone. That was fine by him. It was a Tuesday in late September when everything changed, though Ethan wouldn't realize it until much later. He'd spent the morning mending fence along the eastern property line, the part that bordered the foothills where pine and scrub oak tangled into wilderness. Nobody went back there. The terrain was rough, the soil poor, and there were easier ways to lose yourself if that's what you were after. He was hammering the last post when he felt it, that prickling awareness that comes from being watched. Ethan straightened slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved except the wind through the grass. He was about to return to work when he saw her. A little girl stood 30 feet away, just beyond the fence. She wore a faded calico dress that had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt, and her feet were bare despite the September chill. Dark hair fell in tangles around a face that was all wide eyes and sharp chin. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Ethan's heart stopped, then kicked hard against his ribs. "Hello," the girl said. Her voice was clear and unafraid. He stared at her, hammer dangling from one hand. There were no neighbors out here. The nearest ranch was 5 miles south, and the Hendersons who owned it had teenage boys, not little girls. The town was 8 miles west, too far for a child to wander alone. "Where did you come from?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by disuse. The girl tilted her head, considering him with unsettling directness. "Back there." She pointed toward the trees. "You look sad. Are you sad?" The question hit him like a slap. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Where are your parents?" "Mama's at the cabin." She said it like it was obvious, like he should already know. "Want to meet her?" "What cabin?" "The one in the hollow, past the big rocks and the creek that's mostly dry." She smiled then, sudden and bright. "I'm Lily." Ethan felt something cold settle in his gut. There was no cabin in the hollow. He'd walked every inch of this property when he bought it, marking boundaries, checking for structures. The eastern section was wilderness, nothing more. "Lily, where do you really live?" "I told you." She was starting to look impatient now, the way children do when adults are being deliberately obtuse. "Come on, I'll show you. Mama makes good coffee. She says coffee's important for sad people." Every instinct told him this was wrong. Children didn't appear out of nowhere. There were no cabins in the wilderness. This was how people ended up in trouble, following strange children into the trees like some dark fairy tale. But Lily was already walking away, bare feet soundless on the hard-packed earth. She glanced back once, and there was something in her expression, an expectation, a certainty, that made it impossible to let her go alone. "Wait," Ethan heard himself say. He followed her through the fence, leaving his tools behind. The girl moved with the confidence of someone who knew these woods intimately, ducking under branches, stepping over rocks without looking down. Ethan had to work to keep up, his boots loud and clumsy compared to her silence. They climbed into the foothills, following a deer trail that wound between pines. The air cooled as they moved deeper into shadow. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Squatters, drifters, someone using his land for God knew what purpose. His hand moved unconsciously toward his belt, where a knife rode in its sheath. "Not much further," Lily called back cheerfully. "Mama's probably sewing. She's always sewing." The trail descended into a hollow Ethan didn't remember, though the trees here grew thick enough to hide almost anything. A creek bed cut through the center, mostly dry as Lily had said, just a trickle of water moving over smooth stones. And there, tucked against the far slope, like it had grown there, was a cabin. Ethan stopped dead. It was small, maybe 2 rooms, built from logs that had weathered to silver gray. The roof was shingled with split wood, the chimney stacked stone. Smoke rose thin and white from that chimney. A vegetable garden sprawled to one side, neat rows showing the last of the season's growth. Clothes hung on a line strung between trees, women's dresses, a child's small things, all faded but clean. Someone lived here, on his land. Had lived here, by the look of things, for some time. "See?" Lily had turned back, hands on her hips. "I told you." Before Ethan could respond, the cabin door opened. A woman stepped out onto the narrow porch, and the world tilted sideways. She was tall and rail-thin, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that fell past her shoulders. Her dress was simple homespun, patched like lilies, and she wore a canvas apron covered in what looked like flour. Her face was angular, almost severe, with high cheekbones and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But her eyes, gray as winter sky, fixed on him with an intensity that made him forget how to breathe. "Lily." Her voice was low, controlled. "Come here." The girl skipped forward obediently. The woman's hand settled on Lily's shoulder, and Ethan saw the protective tension in her posture, the way she angled herself slightly between her daughter and him. "I'm sorry," Ethan managed. "I didn't know anyone was... I own this land. I know who you are." The woman's expression didn't change. "Ethan Cole. Bought the property 6 years ago from the Mercer estate. You've never come back here before." The fact that she knew his name should have alarmed him more than it did. "You're trespassing." "Yes." The simple acknowledgement threw him. He'd expected excuses, explanations, fear. Instead, she just stood there, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, watching him with those winter eyes. "How long have you been here?" 4 years, give or take. 4 years. 4 years she'd lived on his property, and he'd never known. The realization made him feel stupid and blind. Why? "Because I needed somewhere the town couldn't find me." She said it flatly, without emotion. "And because this cabin was here long before you owned the deed. My grandfather built it. I have more right to it than you do." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not how property law works." "No, it's not." She paused, and something flickered across her face. Not fear, but calculation. "Are you going to make us leave?" The question hung between them. Lily looked up at her mother, then at Ethan, her small face serious. The wind moved through the pines, carrying the smell of wood smoke and something baking, bread maybe, or biscuits. "What's your name?" Ethan asked instead of answering. The woman hesitated. "Mara. Mara Hale." Hale. The name triggered a vague memory, something he'd heard in town years ago. A story whispered in the general store, conversation that had died when he approached. He couldn't remember the details, only the tone, dark, disapproving. "And you've been hiding here for 4 years?" "Yes." "From what?" Mara's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "That's not your concern." "It is if you're on my land." "Then evict us." She lifted her chin, and there was something magnificent in the gesture, a pride that wouldn't bend even facing homelessness. "But we haven't heard anything. The cabin was abandoned, falling apart. I've repaired it, kept it standing. The garden's on land that was fallow. We've taken nothing that was yours." It was true, Ethan realized. The cabin did look solid, well-maintained. The garden was obviously tended with care. And in 4 years, she'd left no trace he'd been able to find. No evidence of her presence beyond this hidden hollow. Lily tugged on her mother's apron. Can he stay for coffee? Lily, he looks sad, Mama, like you used to look, before we came here. Mara's composure cracked just for a second, and Ethan saw something raw beneath it. Grief, maybe, or bone-deep exhaustion. Then it was gone, locked away behind that controlled expression. I should go, Ethan said. He didn't know why he was retreating, only that this woman and her knowing daughter had knocked him off balance in a way he couldn't articulate. Yes, Mara agreed, you should. But neither of them moved. Lily looked between them, then sighed with the exasperation of a child dealing with foolish adults. The coffee's already made. Mama always makes extra, says you never know when someone might need it. Lily, that's enough. But Mama, inside, now. The girl went, but not before shooting Ethan a look that seemed to say this isn't over. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. Mara and Ethan stood in the clearing 10 feet and a world apart. I won't tell anyone you're here, Ethan said finally. He didn't know why he was making the promise, only that it felt necessary. Not yet. Not yet, Mara repeated, meaning you're still deciding. Meaning I need to think. She studied him for a long moment. You want to know what they say about me in town? It wasn't a question. Ethan found himself nodding. They'll tell you I'm mad, dangerous, that I killed my husband and got away with it because they couldn't prove it, that I'm unfit to raise a child, that Lily would be better off anywhere but with me. Her voice stayed level, reciting the accusations like a grocery list. They'll tell you I'm a witch or cursed or both, that bad things happen to people who get close to me. Is any of it true? Does it matter? Mara smiled, and it was the saddest thing Ethan had ever seen. You've already decided what you think. Everyone does. I haven't decided anything. Then you're the first. She turned and walked back into the cabin without another word, leaving Ethan standing alone in the clearing as the door closed with quiet finality. He stood there longer than he should have, staring at that closed door. Smoke still rose from the chimney. The clothes still moved on the line. A child's laugh drifted from inside the cabin, muffled but bright. Finally, Ethan turned and made his way back through the trees, following the trail in reverse. His tools were where he'd left them. The fence still needed finishing. The cattle still needed tending. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. That night, Ethan sat in his kitchen with a bottle of whiskey he didn't open and a question he couldn't answer. What did a man do when he found ghosts living on his land? He thought about Mara's gray eyes and proud chin, about Lily's bare feet and knowing questions, about a cabin hidden in the wilderness for 4 years, invisible to everyone but him. The smart thing would be to ride into Coldwater tomorrow, ask around, get the full story, find out what Mara Hale had done that was bad enough to make her hide in the woods with a child, contact the sheriff maybe, or whoever handled these things. The smart thing. Ethan poured the whiskey back in the bottle without drinking and went to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. He kept seeing that cabin, smoke rising white against the pines, kept hearing Lily's voice. You look sad. He was sad. Had been sad for 6 years since the night his brother died, and Ethan walked away from the wreckage with nothing but guilt and inheritance money. He'd thought the land would fix it, thought hard work and isolation would scour the grief away. It hadn't. But standing in that clearing, watching Mara Hale defend her hidden life with nothing but dignity and a child's hand on her shoulder, that had felt like something. Like the first crack in the ice that had been growing over his chest since the funeral. Dawn came gray and cold. Ethan did his morning work mechanically, his mind elsewhere. He told himself he wasn't going back to the hollow. Told himself all the way through breakfast and feeding and the long ride along the fence line. Told himself right up until he found his boots carrying him east, toward the foothills and the trees. The cabin looked different in morning light, smaller, more fragile. No smoke rose from the chimney yet. The garden was quiet. Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, suddenly uncertain. What was he doing here? What did he expect? The door opened. Lily emerged, still in her nightdress, carrying a bucket toward the creek. She saw him and stopped, face lighting up. You came back. Lily, Mama said you wouldn't. She said people don't come back. But I knew. I told her. The girl set down her bucket and ran to him, stopping just short of touching. Are you still sad? Yeah, Ethan said honestly. I think I am. That's okay. Mama says sadness takes time, like bread rising. You can't rush it. She picked up her bucket again. Are you staying for breakfast? Mama's making cornmeal mush. It's better than it sounds. Before Ethan could answer, Mara appeared in the doorway. She'd already dressed, her hair in its neat braid, but she looked tired, like she hadn't slept any better than he had. Mr. Cole. Ma'am. They stared at each other across the clearing. Lily looked between them and sighed. He's staying for breakfast, Mama. He needs it. Look at him. He's all bones and sadness. Lily, you can't just... Can too. You said hospitality matters. You said it's how we stay human. The girl crossed her arms, a perfect miniature of her mother's proud stance. Well? Mara's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You're going to be trouble when you're older. I'm trouble now. You say so all the time. This time Mara did smile, small and quick, and it transformed her face completely, made her look younger, softer, like someone who might laugh if given half a reason. Come in, she said to Ethan, before my daughter shames us both. The cabin's interior was neat and sparse. A main room with a cast-iron stove, a rough table, 2 chairs and a bench, shelves lined with preserved goods and sewing supplies. A curtain divided off what must be a sleeping area. Everything was old but clean, worn but cared for. The smell of coffee and cornmeal filled the air. Ethan sat at the table while Mara worked at the stove, her movements efficient and practiced. Lily chattered about a bird's nest she'd found, a story that seemed to require elaborate hand gestures and sound effects. Mara didn't tell her to be quiet. Sugar? Mara asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of him. Black's fine. She nodded and returned to the stove. The coffee was strong and good, better than anything he made for himself. Ethan wrapped his hands around the cup and felt something in his chest loosen slightly. They ate in near silence, Lily's chatter filling the gaps. The cornmeal mush was, as promised, better than it sounded. Cooked with milk Mara must have gotten from somewhere, sweetened with honey. Ethan ate mechanically at first, then with genuine hunger. When had he last eaten a meal someone else prepared? When had he last sat at a table with other people? Why did you come back? Mara asked finally. She wasn't looking at him, her attention apparently on her own bowl, but the question hung heavy. Ethan set down his spoon. I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Mara did look at him then, those gray eyes searching. I meant what I said yesterday. We haven't heard anything. We don't need anything from you. You can pretend you never found us. Could you? Ethan asked. If you found someone living on land you owned, could you just forget about it? Yes. The certainty in her voice told him she was lying. Or maybe not lying. Maybe Mara Hale had simply gotten so good at survival that she could convince herself of anything. I won't tell anyone you're here, Ethan said. I mean it. Not the town, not the sheriff. But I need to understand why you're hiding. I need to know what I'm protecting if I keep quiet. Lily had stopped chattering. She looked at her mother with wide, worried eyes. Mara was silent for a long time. Then she stood, began clearing the table, her movements sharp and controlled. I came to Coldwater 8 years ago with my husband, Robert Hale. He was a merchant, successful, respected. We built a good life, had a daughter. Her voice was flat, reciting facts. 3 years after we arrived, Robert died. Horse threw him during a storm, broke his neck. She paused, hands gripping the edge of the table. The town decided I'd killed him. No proof, no evidence, just rumor and suspicion. They couldn't charge me with anything, but they could make my life impossible. Refused to trade with me. Crossed the street when they saw me coming, told their children to stay away from Lily, like whatever sickness they thought I carried might be catching. Ethan's stomach turned. I tried to stay, Mara continued. Tried to outlast it, but it got worse. Someone threw rocks through my windows. Someone else left a dead crow on my doorstep. The sheriff suggested I might be happier somewhere else. For Lily's sake, he said. She laughed, bitter and sharp. For Lily's sake. Like raising her surrounded by hate would be better than raising her in the woods. So you left. I remembered this place from when I was young. My grandfather built it as a hunting cabin, but he'd been dead 20 years and the land sold off. I thought maybe we could just disappear. And we did. She turned to face him fully. For 4 years, we disappeared. Lily's learned to read from books I carried out. She can identify every plant in these woods, knows which ones heal and which ones kill. She's never been sick, never been hungry, never been anything but loved. She's never been around other children, Ethan said quietly. No. Never been to town, never been to school. I know what she's missing. Mara's voice cracked like a whip. You think I don't know? You think I wanted this for her? Lily slipped from her chair and went to her mother, wrapping thin arms around Mara's waist. Mara's hand came down automatically, stroking the girl's dark hair. I'm happy, Mama, Lily said softly. I am. I know, baby. Ethan looked at them standing there, mother and daughter, alone against the world, and felt something shift in his chest. He thought about the town, about the way gossip could kill as surely as any weapon, thought about his own 6 years of isolation, chosen but no less complete. Teach me, he said. Both of them stared at him. Teach me what needs doing around here, the cabin, the garden, whatever. I've got land sitting empty and a fence that needs mending. You've got skills I don't. He spoke slowly, working it out as he went. We help each other. I don't tell anyone you're here. You teach me how to grow something besides grief. Mara's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I'm tired, Ethan said simply. Tired of being alone. Tired of this land feeling like a grave. And because that little girl shouldn't have to hide in the woods, because grown adults couldn't see past their own ugliness. Lily beamed at him. Mara's expression remained guarded, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Hope, maybe, or the memory of hope. This isn't charity, she said carefully. If we're helping each other, it's equal. I don't need saving. Good. I'm not any kind of hero. And if you change your mind, if you decide we're too much trouble, you tell me straight. You don't go behind my back to the sheriff or the church or whoever you think should handle the strange woman in the woods. I promise. Mara studied him for another long moment. Then slowly she extended her hand. Ethan took it. Her grip was strong, her palm calloused from work. They shook once, formal as a business contract, and something settled between them. Not friendship, not yet, but the possibility of it. All right then, Mara said. I hope you're ready to work, Mr. Cole. That fence of yours is a disgrace. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. Yes, ma'am. Lily whooped and grabbed his hand, already pulling him toward the door to show him her favorite spots in the woods. Mara followed more slowly, and when Ethan glanced back, he caught her watching with an expression he couldn't quite read. They worked through the morning, the three of them falling into an easy rhythm. Mara showed him her repair work on the cabin, logs she'd chinked, roof sections she'd replaced. Lily demonstrated her knowledge of the local plants with the seriousness of a professor. Ethan found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories about the cattle, the land, the way the weather turned in these mountains. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. When the sun climbed high, they stopped for water from the creek. Ethan sat on a fallen log while Lily played at the water's edge, building elaborate dams from stones and sticks. She looks like him, Mara said quietly, sitting beside him. Robert. Same dark hair, same stubborn chin. Sometimes I look at her and see him so clearly it hurts. Did you love him? Yes. No hesitation. He was kind, patient. He saw me as more than just another pretty face to hang off his arm. When he died, she trailed off, watching her daughter. When he died, they took that away from me, made it dirty, made our whole marriage into some kind of lie where I'd been waiting for the chance to push him off a horse. That's not what happened. No, but truth doesn't matter when people want a villain. She turned to look at him. Why aren't you married, Mr. Cole? Man your age, with land, seems like half the unmarried women in the territory would line up. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I was engaged once, Sarah Brennan. We were going to get married the summer I turned 25, but my brother, Tom, he was wild. Always in trouble, always needing bailing out. The night before our wedding, he got drunk, stole a horse, tried to race it back to the ranch. He swallowed hard. Never made it. Horse threw him same as yours threw Robert. I was supposed to be watching him, supposed to keep him out of trouble. And Sarah? Said she couldn't marry a man who'd always be looking backward. She was right. Ethan picked up a stone, turning it over in his hands. I used the inheritance money to buy this place. Thought maybe I could outrun it. But grief's got longer legs than I do. Mara's hand settled on his shoulder, warm and solid. Grief's not something you outrun. It's something you learn to carry. Is that what you've been doing out here? Learning to carry it, yes. For Lily, for myself, for the memory of a man who deserved better than to be turned into a murder weapon. She squeezed once, then let go. We're quite a pair, Mr. Cole. Two ghosts haunting the same stretch of land. Ethan, he said, if we're working together, you should call me Ethan. All right, Ethan. She smiled, small but real. And I'm Mara, not ma'am, not Mrs. Hale, just Mara. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily play. The afternoon sun filtered through the pines, turning everything golden. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan Cole felt like he'd found something worth holding on to. The days that followed established a pattern that felt both strange and natural. Ethan would ride out to the hollow most mornings, sometimes bringing supplies he claimed were extra from town runs, sometimes just bringing himself. Mara never asked him to come, but she stopped looking surprised when he appeared at the tree line. Lily would run to greet him, chattering about whatever had captured her attention that day. A fox den she'd discovered, a constellation Mara had taught her to find, the way ice was starting to form at the creek's edges as October deepened. They worked in a companionable silence that required no explanation. Ethan helped Mara stack firewood for the coming winter, cutting and splitting logs with an efficiency born from years of solitary labor. She showed him how to preserve vegetables he'd let rot in his own root cellar, her hands quick and sure as she packed jars with beets and carrots in brine. Lily appointed herself supervisor of all projects, offering commentary and occasionally helping in ways that were more endearing than useful. It was during one of these ordinary afternoons, nearly 2 weeks after that first breakfast, that Ethan noticed the tear in his work shirt had been mended. The stitching was so fine he almost missed it, small, even stitches in thread that matched the fabric exactly. He touched the repair, feeling the raised line of careful work. Mara? She looked up from where she was showing Lily how to card wool, her hands still moving through the practiced motion. Did you fix my shirt? A faint color rose in her cheeks. You left it on the fence post last week when it was hot. I noticed the tear. You didn't have to, I know. She returned her attention to the wool, not meeting his eyes. But I did anyway. That's what I do. What I did before. I was a seamstress. A good one. Ethan looked down at the mended tear again, at the precision of the work. You still are. Not much call for fine sewing in the woods. Doesn't make you any less good at it. Mara's hand stilled. When she looked up, something vulnerable flickered across her face before she locked it away. Thank you. The moment stretched between them, weighted with things neither knew how to say. Lily, oblivious to the adult complexity hanging in the air, held up her handful of carded wool triumphantly. Look, Ethan, it's soft like clouds. He crossed to admire her work, letting the moment pass, but he felt Mara's eyes on him as he knelt beside the girl. That night, riding back to his empty ranch house, he thought about skilled hands forced into idleness, about talents buried in the wilderness, because the town had decided one woman's grief looked too much like guilt. The next time he came to the hollow, he brought fabric. Mara stared at the brown paper package like it might bite her. What is this? Wool. Good quality. I told the shopkeeper it was for curtains. Ethan set it on her table, suddenly uncertain. Thought maybe you could make yourself a proper winter coat. Lily, too. I've seen you both shivering when the wind picks up. I can't accept this. Why not? Because, she gestured helplessly, because I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. Consider it payment for all the meals you fed me, for the mending, for... He stopped, searching for words. For making this place feel less empty. Mara's throat worked as she swallowed. Her fingers moved toward the package, then pulled back. Ethan, Mama, can I see? Lily was already climbing onto a chair, trying to peek into the wrapping. Lily, mind your manners. But the girl had already pulled the paper open, revealing deep blue wool that caught the afternoon light. Oh, she breathed. It's beautiful. Mara's resistance crumbled as she watched her daughter's face. Her hand came out, tentative, to touch the fabric. Her expression shifted into something Ethan had never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated longing. It's been so long, she whispered, since I had anything new to work with. Then work with it now. Ethan stepped back, giving her space. Make something that keeps you both warm, that's all I'm asking. That evening, as the light faded and he prepared to leave, Ethan glanced back to see Mara at her table with the fabric spread before her, measuring and marking with a piece of chalk. Her face held a concentration that was almost reverent. Lily sat beside her, watching with rapt attention as her mother's hands remembered their purpose. The coats took shape over the following week. Ethan would arrive to find Mara sewing by the window where the light was best, her needle flashing as it pulled thread through wool. She worked with an intensity that was beautiful to watch, every stitch precise, every seam perfect. Sometimes she'd pause to show Lily a particular technique, her voice soft as she explained the why of each choice. You're teaching her, Ethan observed one afternoon. Mara didn't look up from her work. It's what my mother taught me, what her mother taught her. This kind of knowledge shouldn't die just because we're hiding in the woods. You won't be hiding forever. Her hand stilled. Won't I? Lily's getting older. She needs more than this hollow can give her. She needs to be safe. She needs to be loved. Everything else is secondary. Mara set down her needle, finally meeting his eyes. You don't understand what it was like, Ethan. The way they looked at her, like she was tainted by association, like my supposed sins had infected her somehow. She was 3 years old. That didn't matter. Children learn cruelty from their parents. Her voice cracked. I couldn't watch my daughter learn to be ashamed of herself because of lies about me. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way, but he'd seen enough of Coldwater to know she was probably right. Small towns had long memories and sharp teeth. Forgiveness wasn't in their nature. What was he like? He asked instead. Robert? Mara's expression softened. Terrible at cards. Couldn't bluff to save his life. He'd get this little crease between his eyebrows when he was trying to lie, and I'd know immediately. She picked up her sewing again, her hands moving through memory. He loved thunderstorms. Used to stand on the porch and watch them roll in, completely fearless. And he sang. Not well, but enthusiastically. Especially when he was happy. Sounds like a good man. He was. He really was. She paused, needle hovering above fabric. The horse that killed him, it wasn't his regular mount. His horse had gone lame the day before, and he borrowed one from the livery. The storm spooked it, that's all, just bad luck and bad timing. But the town needed it to be more than that. The town needed a story that made sense. Successful merchant dies suddenly, leaves behind a young widow. That's not dramatic enough. But if the widow killed him for his money, for his property, for whatever dark reason they could imagine, that's a story worth telling. Her voice had gone flat again, reciting old pain like a lesson learned by rote. Within a month, I was the villain of Coldwater. Within a year, I was invisible. And then I came here and became actually invisible. Lily wandered in from outside, her hands full of late autumn leaves she'd collected. Mama, can we press these? For the book? Of course, sweetheart. Get the heavy dictionary from the shelf. Ethan watched as they carefully arranged leaves between pages, Lily's small fingers delicate and precise under her mother's guidance. This was what Mara had built in the wilderness, a world where her daughter could be curious and unafraid, where learning came from observation and love instead of judgment and fear. But it was also a world that couldn't last forever. The coats were finished by the end of October. Mara had made them both with deep hoods and pockets lined with scraps of softer fabric. Lily's had been cut with room to grow, the hems left long to be taken up as she got taller. When Lily put hers on for the first time, she spun in a circle, making the fabric flare. I look like a princess. You look warm, Mara corrected, but she was smiling. That's better than being a princess. Can be both, Lily declared with a child's absolute certainty. Ethan had brought coffee and the last of his sugar, and they sat on the porch while Lily played in the clearing, her new coat bright against the gray November landscape. The cold was setting in earnest now, frost clinging to the shadows even at midday. "Winter's going to be hard out here," Ethan said carefully. "We managed last year, and the year before that." Lily was smaller then, needed less. Mara's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting something?" "I'm suggesting that my ranch house has 4 bedrooms sitting empty, a kitchen with a proper stove, a root cellar that actually stays cold." He kept his voice neutral, watching her face. "I'm suggesting that maybe you don't have to spend another winter in a 2-room cabin." "No." "Mara, no." She stood abruptly, her new coat swirling around her. "I know what that would look like. Unmarried woman, widower, living under the same roof. You think the town would ignore that?" "The town doesn't know you exist." "Someone would find out. Someone always finds out." She wrapped her arms around herself. "And then you'd be tainted by association too. You'd lose whatever respectability you have left." "I don't care about—" "You should." She turned to face him, and her eyes were fierce. "You should care, because right now you're still part of Coldwater. Even if you keep yourself separate, you can still walk into the general store, still do business, still exist in the world. If they connect you to me, that ends, and I won't be responsible for that." Ethan stood to face her. "What if I'm willing to take that risk?" "Why would you be?" "Because—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Because the hollow didn't feel empty anymore. Because he'd started waking up with something to look forward to instead of just another day to survive. Because Lily's laugh and Mara's quiet competence had reminded him what it felt like to be part of something instead of just a ghost going through motions. Because somewhere in the last month, they'd stopped being strangers and started being something else. Something he didn't have a name for, but desperately wanted to keep. "Because you shouldn't have to hide," he said finally. "Neither of you should." Mara's expression crumpled just for a second before she pulled it back together. "That's kind. It is. But kindness doesn't change reality." "Then maybe we change reality." "How? By marching into Coldwater and demanding they accept me? By forcing Lily into a town that's already decided she's the daughter of a murderer?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's not how the world works." "Then how does it work?" "You survive. You protect what matters. You make peace with the fact that some battles can't be won." She looked past him to where Lily was building something elaborate with sticks and stones. "And you teach your daughter that she's worth more than their judgment, even if you can never quite believe it yourself." The honesty of it hit Ethan like a fist. He wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way, but Mara's face told him she'd already fought this fight 1,000 times in her own head and lost every round. "The offer stands," he said quietly. "For the winter, for whenever. My door's open." "I know." Her voice had gone soft. "And that means more than you realize. But I can't accept it." They stood in silence while Lily's cheerful voice narrated her stick construction project. The sun was starting to sink, painting the clearing in amber light. Ethan should leave, head back before full dark. Instead, he found himself speaking again. "My brother, Tom, he used to say that the worst thing about dying young was all the apologies you'd never get to make, all the people you'd hurt that you'd never get to face." Ethan watched Lily, not looking at Mara. "I spent 6 years thinking he was talking about the people he'd wronged, only recently realized he might have been talking about me." "What do you mean?" "I was angry at him, for years before he died. Angry that he couldn't get his life together, that he kept needing rescue, that I was always cleaning up his messes instead of building my own life." The words came hard, scraping out. "The night before my wedding, when he showed up drunk, I told him I was done, that after Sarah and I married, he was on his own, that I couldn't keep saving him." Mara was very still beside him. "He died trying to prove he didn't need saving, trying to show me he could handle himself." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "And I never got to tell him I was sorry, that I didn't mean it, that I'd have kept saving him forever if it meant he'd still be here." "Ethan, point is, Mara, I know what it's like to carry something you can't put down, to have the whole world shrink until it's just you and your guilt and nothing else." He finally looked at her. "But you're carrying something that isn't even yours. You didn't kill Robert. You didn't do anything except survive him dying. And hiding out here, raising Lily in secret like you're ashamed, that's letting them win. Mara's eyes had gone bright with tears she refused to let fall. You think I don't know that? You think I chose this because I'm weak? I think you chose it because you're strong enough to bear it, but that doesn't mean you should have to. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. Stop. Just stop. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good. It should be hard. Easy would be me walking away and pretending I never found you. Maybe you should do that. Can't. Already tried. Turns out I'm not as good at isolation as I thought I was. That startled a laugh out of her, watery but genuine. We're a mess, aren't we? Both of us. Lily seems to be doing all right. They both turned to watch the girl who had apparently decided her stick construction was a castle and was now defending it from imaginary invaders with elaborate sound effects. She is, isn't she? Mara's voice held wonder and grief in equal measure. Despite everything, despite me, she's growing up brave and curious and kind. Because of you, Ethan corrected, not despite you. Mara turned to him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with words. An understanding, maybe? A recognition of kindred damage. Stay for supper, she said finally. It's getting dark anyway. You shouldn't ride back through the forest at night. That an invitation or an order? Does it matter? Not really, no. They went inside where Mara had rabbit stew simmering and cornbread waiting. Ethan set the table while she served, a routine that had become familiar without either of them noticing when it happened. Lily chattered through the meal about her castle and the invaders and the brave princess who defended it alone. Not alone, Mara said gently. The princess had allies, people who chose to stand with her. But in the beginning she was alone, Lily insisted. That's what makes her brave. She was alone and scared, but she stood anyway. Mara's hand trembled slightly as she set down her spoon. Ethan reached across the table without thinking, his fingers covering hers. She didn't pull away. After supper, as Ethan prepared to leave, Lily hugged him goodnight with unselfconscious affection. Come back tomorrow? If your mama says it's all right. Mama always says yes. She just pretends she might say no first. Lily! But Mara was smiling. It's true. You like when Ethan comes. You smile more. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults spent lifetimes avoiding. Ethan caught Mara's eye and saw the pink rising in her cheeks, saw her struggle between denial and honesty. I do smile more, she admitted finally. But that's our secret, understand? Some things are private. Lily nodded solemnly, then ruined it by whispering loudly to Ethan, she smiles a lot more. He rode home through the dark forest with Lily's words echoing in his head. She smiles more. Such a simple observation, such a profound truth. When had he started measuring his days by whether he'd made Mara smile? When had her rare laughter become the thing he worked toward without realizing it? The ranch house felt emptier than usual that night. 4 bedrooms, just like he'd said, all of them collecting dust. A kitchen where he ate standing up more often than not. Rooms full of furniture he'd inherited and never used. Potential he'd let go to waste. November deepened into cold that bit hard. Ethan started spending entire days at the hollow, helping Mara winterize the cabin, showing Lily how to check snares for rabbits, chopping enough wood to see them through until spring. They fell into rhythms that felt like family, even though none of them acknowledged it aloud. It was during one of these long days that Lily asked the question that changed everything. Ethan, how come you don't have a family? They were at the creek, Lily helping him check the fish trap they'd built. Mara was back at the cabin, working on some sewing project she'd been mysterious about. I used to have a brother, Ethan said carefully. But he died. Like my papa. Yeah, like your papa. Lily considered this, her small face serious. Were you sad? Very sad. Still am, sometimes. Mama says sad is okay. It means you loved somebody real big. She picked up a smooth stone, examining it closely. Do you think they know? The people who died? Do you think they know we still love them? The question hit him square in the chest. I'd like to think so. Me too. I tell Papa stories sometimes. At night, when Mama thinks I'm sleeping. I tell him about the woods and the animals and all the things I learned. She looked up at Ethan with those two knowing eyes. You think that's silly? No, I think it's one of the smartest things I've ever heard. They worked in silence for a while, the trap revealing two decent-sized trout. As they walked back to the cabin, Lily's hand found his, small and trusting. I'm glad you found us, she said. Mama's glad too, even though she won't say it. We were so lonely before. So was I, Ethan admitted. But now we're lonely together, so it doesn't count. He laughed despite the ache in his throat. That's not quite how it works. Sure it is. Mama explained it once. She said loneliness is like being cold. If you're cold by yourself, you just get colder. But if you're cold with other people, you can share warmth until nobody's cold anymore. Lily swung their joined hands. We're sharing warmth now. When they reached the cabin, Mara was waiting on the porch, and the smile she gave them, open and genuine and entirely unguarded, made Ethan understand what Lily meant about sharing warmth. Something in his chest that had been frozen for 6 years was finally starting to thaw. That night, for the first time, Mara asked him to stay past dark. It's foolish to ride through the forest at night, she said, not quite meeting his eyes. You could sleep by the fire. Leave at first light. It was a practical suggestion. It was also an invitation to something more. Not romance, not yet, but intimacy of a different kind. Trust. The willingness to be vulnerable in sleep, to share space through the dark hours. If you're sure, I'm sure. So Ethan bedded down on the floor near the stove while Mara and Lily disappeared behind the curtain to their sleeping area. He lay awake long after the cabin went quiet, listening to Lily's soft breathing and Mara's quieter movements as she settled for sleep. Moonlight filtered through the single window, painting everything silver. Smoke rose lazy from the banked fire. This, he thought, this was what he'd been missing. Not Sarah, not the wedding that never happened, not even Tom exactly. Just this sense of belonging somewhere, of being woven into the fabric of other people's lives instead of existing in isolation. He must have dozed eventually, because he woke to find Mara moving quietly around the cabin, stoking the fire, setting coffee to brew. Dawn light crept through the window, soft and gray. She glanced over and saw him watching. Morning, she said softly. Morning. Sleep all right? Better than I have in years. Something flickered across her face, pleasure, maybe, or recognition. She poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to him, settling on the floor nearby. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day arrive. Thank you, Mara said finally, for staying, for all of it. Nothing to thank me for. There is, though. You could have turned us in the first day. Could have demanded we leave. Instead, you... She paused, searching for words. Instead, you chose to see us, really see us. That's rarer than you think. Mara! The cabin door burst open and Lily tumbled in, breathless and wide-eyed. Mama, there's people in the woods! They were on their feet instantly. Ethan moved to the window while Mara pulled Lily close. Where? He asked, keeping his voice calm. Near the big rocks. 2 men on horses. They were talking about the hollow. Ethan's blood went cold. Stay inside, both of you. Don't make a sound. He slipped out the door before Mara could protest, moving quietly through the trees toward the rock formation Lily had mentioned. Sure enough, voices drifted through the morning air, male, casual, too close for comfort. Telling you, Henderson saw smoke rising from this direction, been seeing it for weeks now. Could be anyone. Hunters, drifters, on Cole's land? Without permission? Don't think so. Something's going on back here. Ethan recognized the voices. Deputy Crawford and Bill Mason, one of Coldwater's more prominent busybodies. His mind raced. They hadn't found this cabin yet, but they were close. Too close. He stepped out from the trees, making his presence obvious. Both men startled, hands moving toward rifles before recognition set in. Cole, Crawford said, relaxing slightly. Hell of a place to run into you. My land, Ethan said evenly. I could say the same to you. We had reports of smoke. Thought maybe squatters or it's me. The lie came easy. natural. Got a hunting camp back here. Use it when I'm working the eastern fence line. Mason's eyes narrowed. Never mentioned a hunting camp before. Never asked. The two men exchanged glances. Crawford shifted in his saddle. Mind showing us, just to confirm? Ethan's jaw tightened. I mind. This is private property, and you're on it without permission or warrant. I suggest you leave before I decide to press charges for trespassing. Now hold on. You hold on. Ethan's voice went hard. I've been patient with Coldwater's habit of sticking its nose in other people's business. But my land is mine. What I do on it is my concern. Not yours, not the deputies, not anyone's. Crawford's face flushed. We're just trying to leave. Now, before I make this official. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Crawford jerked his horse's head around. Fine. But this isn't over, Cole. People have a right to know what's happening on land this close to town. People have a right to mind their own damn business. He watched them ride away, waiting until the sound of hooves faded completely before allowing himself to breathe again. His hands were shaking. That had been close. Too close. When he returned to the cabin, Mara stood in the doorway, her face ashen. They'll be back, she said. No question, just certainty. Maybe not. They'll be back. She looked past him to the forest, to the direction the men had gone. And next time they'll bring more people. They'll search properly. They'll find us. Lily appeared at her mother's side, unusually quiet. The fear in both their faces made Ethan's decision for him. Then we leave first, he said. Tonight, you pack everything essential. Come to the ranch house before anyone else starts poking around. Ethan, no, I told you, and I'm telling you this isn't a request anymore. He met her eyes, willing her to understand. They're coming, Mara. And when they find this cabin, when they find evidence of you and Lily, it won't matter that it's my land. They'll use it as proof of whatever story they want to tell. But if you're already at the ranch, if we have a story ready, what story? What possible explanation? That you're my employee, hired help, housekeeper, cook, whatever makes sense. Lily's your daughter, you needed work, I needed someone to help run the place. The plan crystallized as he spoke. It's not unusual. Half the ranchers in the territory have hired help living on their property. Mara shook her head. They won't believe it. They don't have to believe it. They just have to accept it. And they will, because the alternative is admitting they drove you into the woods for no reason 4 years ago. Ethan stepped closer. Please, let me do this. Let me help. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. He kept his expression steady, certain, even though his heart hammered against his ribs. Finally, slowly, Mara nodded. Tonight, she whispered, before the moon rises. They moved through the cabin like ghosts preparing to leave a haunting behind. Mara worked with methodical efficiency, her hands steady even as her face betrayed the cost of each decision. 4 years of careful survival reduced to what could fit in 2 worn canvas bags and a wooden trunk that had been her grandmother's. Lily moved between her mother and Ethan, carrying smaller items with a solemnity that made her seem older than her 6 years. Just what matters, Mara murmured, more to herself than anyone else. She folded the blue wool coats with care, then reached for her sewing box, polished wood worn smooth by generations of hands. Her fingers traced the carved initials on the lid. My mother's, and her mother's before that. Ethan watched her wrap it in a scrap of blanket, the tenderness in her movement speaking to lineage and loss. We'll come back for anything else you need. This doesn't have to be goodbye to this place. Doesn't it? Mara's smile was sad and knowing. Once we leave, it stops being ours. Becomes just another abandoned cabin in the woods. Another story people will invent to explain the strange woman who lived here. Let them invent whatever they want. You'll be somewhere safe. Will I? She set the sewing box in the trunk, then turned to face him fully. Ethan, once we're at your ranch, once people see us, there's no taking it back. You understand that? Your reputation, your standing in cold water, it all changes the moment you associate yourself with me publicly. Then it changes. He said it simply, like it meant nothing, even though they both knew it meant everything. I'm done caring what Coldwater thinks. Lily tugged on his sleeve. What about my treasures? The special rocks, and the bird feathers, and the pressed flowers? Mara opened her mouth, probably to say no. They couldn't take everything. But Ethan knelt beside Lily, meeting her eyes at her level. Show me. We'll pack what's most important. They spent the next hour going through Lily's collection of found objects, each one carrying a story she recited with perfect recall. The white stone from the creek where she'd first seen a trout, the hawk feather she'd found the day after a bad storm, the pressed wildflowers from early spring, still bright between the pages of the old dictionary. Ethan listened to every story, helped her choose the pieces that mattered most, and watched Mara's throat work as she witnessed this small kindness. By the time darkness fell complete, they were ready. The cabin stood neat and orderly, as if its occupants had simply stepped out for an evening walk. Mara had banked the fire and left the door unlocked, a gesture that felt like faith or surrender, or both. Wait, she said as Ethan loaded the last bag onto his horse. She disappeared back inside, returning moments later with something bundled in cloth. The quilt. The one Robert's mother made for our wedding. I won't leave it. The bundle went into the trunk with the sewing box and Lily's treasures. Then Mara took one final look at the cabin, her face unreadable in the starlight, and turned away without another word. They made their way through the forest in silence, Lily riding with Ethan while Mara walked alongside, one hand on the stirrup for guidance in the dark. The journey felt longer than it should have, each step carrying them further from the life they'd built in hiding and closer to whatever waited beyond it. When they finally emerged from the trees onto Ethan's land proper, Mara stopped. The ranch house sat dark against the sky, larger and more substantial than the cabin, but also more exposed, more visible. Lamplight would be seen from the road. Smoke from the chimney would be noticed. There would be no more invisibility, no more vanishing into the wilderness when danger approached. I can't, Mara whispered. I thought I could, but I can't. Ethan dismounted carefully, passing Lily's sleepy weight to Mara before turning to face her. You can. You will. Because the alternative is letting them find you unprepared, and I know you're too smart for that. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust that not everyone in the world wants to hurt you. I'm asking you to let someone stand beside you instead of always standing alone. His voice gentled. I'm asking you to be brave enough to be seen. Tears tracked down Mara's face, silver in the moonlight. I've been alone so long. I don't know how to be anything else. Then we'll figure it out together. You, me, and this little one who's already half asleep. He touched Lily's back gently. Come inside, Mara. Come home. The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. Home. Not a hiding place, not a refuge, but home. Mara looked at her daughter, then at the dark house, then back at Ethan. Something in her expression shifted, resolved. All right, she said quietly. All right. The ranch house interior was sparse but solid, furnished with pieces that had clearly been chosen for function over comfort. Ethan lit lamps while Mara stood in the main room holding Lily, her eyes taking in the space with an expression he couldn't read. It was clean, at least. He'd always kept it clean, even when nothing else in his life made sense. Guest room's upstairs, he said, suddenly aware of how empty the house felt, how obvious his isolation. There's 2 of them. You and Lily can take your pick, or share one if you'd rather. We'll share. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper, at least at first. He showed them upstairs to the larger guest room, the one with windows facing east to catch morning light. Lily had fallen fully asleep, her head heavy on her mother's shoulder. Mara laid her on the bed, a real bed with a mattress and quilts, and stood looking down at her daughter with an expression of wonder and grief. She's never slept in a real bed, Mara said. I built her a cot from pine branches and old blankets, but this, she touched the quilt. This is what children should have. Then she'll have it, for as long as you're here. Ethan paused in the doorway. There's a washroom at the end of the hall, kitchens downstairs whenever you're hungry. And Mara, you're safe here. I promise. She turned to look at him, and in the lamplight her face showed every year of hardship she'd endured, every moment of fear and survival, but also something else, something that might have been hope. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Ethan had asked himself the same question 100 times since that first morning when Lily appeared at his fence. The answers were complicated, layered, because it was right, because she needed help, because Lily deserved better than hiding. But standing there in the doorway with Mara looking at him like he held answers to questions she'd stopped asking years ago, the truth came clearer. Because the hollow stopped feeling empty when I found you there, he said. And I don't want to go back to empty. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him and moving down the hall to his own room. Sleep didn't come easy. He lay awake listening to the house settle, to Mara's quiet movements in the guest room, to the sound of Lily's breathing through the walls. The house that had been a tomb for 6 years suddenly felt alive. Dawn came cold and bright. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee and something baking, scents so foreign to his morning routine that for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Then memory crashed back. Mara and Lily, the cabin, the decision made in darkness that would reshape everything in light. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to find Mara at his stove, moving through his kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd cooked in far worse conditions. Biscuits were browning in the oven. Eggs waited in a bowl. She'd found the coffee and the good cups he never used, and the whole room felt transformed by her presence. "Morning," he said. She turned and he saw the exhaustion in her face, the evidence of a sleepless night. "I hope you don't mind. I needed to do something with my hands, and cooking seemed—" she gestured vaguely. "Seemed like something useful." "Mind? You're feeding me real breakfast. First time in 6 years I've had that." A small smile touched her lips. 6 years of bachelor cooking. I'm amazed you're still alive." "Wasn't really living, just surviving. There's a difference." He poured coffee, savoring the way she'd made it strong and dark, the way he preferred without him having to say so. "Where's Lily?" "Still sleeping. The bed is—" "She's never slept so deeply. I checked on her 3 times to make sure she was breathing." Mara's hands twisted in her apron. "Ethan, we need to talk about the story, what we're going to tell people." "Right." He pulled out a chair at the table, gesturing for her to join him. "I've been thinking about it. Simple is better. You're a widow who needed work. I needed help managing the house and the property. You've been here, 2 weeks?" "Why 2 weeks?" "Long enough that it's not brand new, short enough that no one can claim they should have noticed sooner." He watched her process this, saw her mind working through angles and implications. "Your husband died 4 years ago in where?" "Colorado, small mining town outside Denver." She said it smoothly, and he realized she'd been preparing this lie for hours, maybe years. "Collapse killed him and 3 other men. I took Lily and left because there was nothing keeping us there." "You heard through a cousin, friend, that I was looking for help." "Advertisement in the Denver paper. I wrote, you replied, I came." Mara met his eyes. "We keep it simple. I cook, clean, help with the books. Lily stays out of sight mostly, too young for school yet. We're quiet, we're useful, and we give them nothing to gossip about. Except for the fact that you're Mara Hale." Her face went carefully blank. "You think they'll recognize me?" "I think some will. The ones who've been in Coldwater longest, the ones who were there when Robert died." Ethan leaned forward. "We can't hide who you are, Mara. They'll figure it out eventually. So we control the narrative first." "How?" "We tell the truth, or close to it." He could see her starting to object and pressed on. "You're Robert Hale's widow. You left town 4 years ago because of malicious gossip. You've been surviving on your own, raising Lily, working as a seamstress when you could find work. Now you're back because you need steady employment and I need help. That's it. That's the whole story. They'll never accept it. Some won't, but some will, especially if we don't act like we're hiding anything." He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "You didn't do anything wrong, Mara. You don't have to act like you did." She stared at his hand, so close to hers but not quite touching. When she spoke, her voice was raw. 4 years I've been invisible. 4 years of teaching myself to take up as little space as possible. You're asking me to just— what? Walk into town like nothing happened? I'm asking you to walk into town like a woman who has nothing to be ashamed of, because you don't." You make it sound easy. It won't be easy. It'll probably be hell, at least at first. But hell with your head up is better than hiding in the woods forever. The oven timer chimed, breaking the tension. Mara stood to rescue the biscuits, her movements mechanical. She plated them alongside scrambled eggs and brought everything to the table with the kind of care that spoke to years of making do with little. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the comfortable quiet they'd shared in the hollow. This silence was heavy with the future bearing down on them both. Lily appeared halfway through breakfast, trailing into the kitchen in her nightdress, with hair wild from sleep. She stopped dead when she saw the table, the food, the morning light streaming through windows she'd never had before. "Is this real?" she asked, voice small and wondering. "It's real, sweetheart." Mara pulled her daughter close. "This is our home now, for as long as Mr. Cole allows it." "Ethan," he corrected, "and it's home for as long as you need it." Lily climbed into a chair, eyes wide as she took in the biscuits and eggs. "Do we have to hide here too?" "No." Mara's voice was firm. "No more hiding. We're going to be very brave and very visible, and we're going to show everyone that we have nothing to be ashamed of. Because Papa didn't die mean. He died from a horse being scared." "That's right, baby." "And people who said different were being unkind." "Yes." Lily considered this while spreading butter on her biscuit with intense concentration. "Are we going to tell them they were unkind?" "If we need to." Mara glanced at Ethan. "But first we're going to live our lives. We're going to work hard and be good neighbors and remember that their unkindness says more about them than it does about us." It was a good speech, delivered with conviction Ethan wasn't sure Mara actually felt. But Lily nodded, satisfied, and turned her attention to breakfast with the single-minded focus only children could achieve. The first test came sooner than expected. Ethan was out checking the barn when he heard hoofbeats approaching fast. He turned to see Deputy Crawford riding up, face set in official lines that didn't bode well. Behind him rode two other men from town, Bill Mason again, and Thomas Henderson, whose property bordered Ethan's to the south. "Cole," Crawford called, not bothering to dismount. "We need to talk about your hunting camp." Ethan crossed his arms, positioning himself between the men and the house. "What about it?" "Check the land records. No structures registered back in that hollow, which means whatever you got there is illegal construction on agricultural land. It's a temporary camp, doesn't need registering." "Then you won't mind showing it to us?" "Official-like." Crawford's hand rested casually near his sidearm, a gesture that was meant to look relaxed, but read as threat. "Just to clear things up." "I do mind, actually. That's my property and my business." Henderson spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older prejudice. "Now, Cole, we're just trying to be good neighbors. Make sure everything's above board. You're new to Coldwater still, might not understand how we do things here." "I understand perfectly. You're trespassing on private land without warrant or cause, harassing a tax-paying citizen, and wasting everyone's time with questions that have already been answered." Ethan kept his voice level, but something in it made Crawford's horse sidestep nervously. "Now I'll ask you once more to leave." "Or what?" Mason sneered. "You'll shoot us? Over a hunting camp?" "I'll file a formal complaint with the territorial marshal. I'll document every instance of harassment, every violation of property rights, and I'll make sure it costs all of you more than you're willing to pay." He paused, letting that sink in. "And then I'll still tell you to get off my land." The standoff might have escalated if the house door hadn't opened at that moment. Mara stepped out onto the porch, wearing one of her simple dresses with an apron tied at her waist. Every inch the respectable housekeeper. She carried a basket of laundry, moving toward the clothesline with purpose. All three visitors went silent, staring. Crawford found his voice first. "Who's that?" "My housekeeper." Ethan didn't turn around, didn't take his eyes off the mounted men. "Mrs. Hale. She arrived 2 weeks ago from Denver." "Hale!" Henderson's voice sharpened. That can't be." "Problem, gentlemen?" Mara's voice carried across the yard, clear and calm as morning air. She'd stopped her work to look at them, chin raised. No hint of the fear Ethan knew must be coursing through her. Mason's face had gone red. "You got some nerve, woman, showing your face around here again." "I have every right to work where I choose. and Mr. Cole was kind enough to offer employment. She resumed hanging laundry with steady hands. Is there something else you needed, or are you just here to waste his time and mine? You can't be serious, Cole. Crawford swung down from his horse now, moving closer with the kind of swagger that came from a badge and too little oversight. You hired her? Mara Hale? Do you know what she... I know she's a skilled worker who needed a job. That's all I need to know. Ethan shifted slightly, keeping himself between Crawford and the porch. And I know that her personal business is none of yours or mine or anyone else's unless she chooses to make it so. Personal business? She killed her husband. No, Mara said quietly, setting down the laundry basket and walking to the porch rail. Robert died in an accident. You all decided it was murder because the truth was too ordinary for your taste. Because a widow with a child made for better gossip than just another tragedy. You expect us to believe... I don't expect anything from you, Deputy Crawford. I learned 4 years ago not to expect fairness or decency from Coldwater. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the tremor underneath. But I'm here now, working honestly, raising my daughter, and staying out of everyone's way. If that's not enough for you, then the problem is yours, not mine. Henderson spurred his horse forward a few steps. Cole, this is insanity. You're harboring a... I'm employing a widow who needs work. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime. Ethan's hand moved to his belt, resting near his own weapon now. And you're about 3 seconds from me deciding this constitutes harassment of my employee. You want to test whether the territorial law sides with a woman trying to feed her child, or 3 men making accusations they can't prove. The threat landed. Crawford's jaw worked, but he stepped back. Mason looked like he wanted to say more, but Henderson grabbed his arm. This isn't over, Henderson said. People have a right to know what kind of woman is living on your property. Then tell them. Tell them she's a seamstress and a mother and a harder worker than half the men in this town. Ethan's voice was ice. And then tell them to mind their own business before I start minding theirs. It was a calculated gamble. Henderson owned one of the larger ranches and had secrets of his own, labor practices that skirted legality, water rights he enforced with more muscle than law. The reminder that scrutiny could cut both ways made him pause. Let's go, he said finally. But Cole, you're making a mistake, and when it costs you, don't say we didn't warn you. They rode off in a cloud of dust and righteous indignation, leaving silence in their wake. Ethan waited until they were completely out of sight before turning to Mara. She still stood on the porch, gripping the rail so hard her knuckles had gone white. You all right? No. She sank down to sit on the porch steps, all the strength bleeding out of her. No, I'm not all right. I thought I was ready. I thought I could face them, but standing there, hearing him say it out loud, her voice broke. Ethan climbed the steps and sat beside her, not touching but close enough to offer presence. You did face them. You stood there, and you spoke the truth, and you didn't back down. That took more courage than most people have in their entire lives. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like terror. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He watched the road where dust still hung in the air. They'll talk now. By sundown, everyone in Coldwater will know you're here. I know. Some will come out of curiosity, some out of anger, some just to see if the rumors are true. He finally looked at her, found her staring at her hands. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I know that too. Mara raised her head and her eyes were wet but clear. But I'm tired of running, tired of teaching Lily that hiding is the only way to survive. If this is what standing looks like, if this is the cost of being visible, then I'll pay it. The door opened behind them and Lily emerged, having obviously been watching from the window. She wedged herself between Mara and Ethan, one small hand finding each of theirs. The mean men left, she announced. Yes, baby, they did. Are they going to come back? Mara and Ethan exchanged glances. Maybe, Mara said. Probably, but we'll be ready. Ethan won't let them hurt us. Will you, Ethan? The simple faith in her voice made his throat tight. No, I won't let anyone hurt you. Lily seemed satisfied with this. She leaned against her mother, still holding Ethan's hand, and they sat together on the porch steps as the morning sun climbed higher. From a distance, they might have looked like a family. Ethan wondered if that's what Crawford and the others had seen, if that's what had really frightened them. Not Mara's presence, but the suggestion that she might build something real here, that she might stop being the convenient villain in their story and become just another person living her life. The day passed in strange normalcy. Mara threw herself into work, cleaning, organizing, taking stock of what the kitchen needed. Lily explored the house with the careful wonder of someone afraid the dream might end. Ethan went about his usual chores, but found himself constantly aware of where they were, what they were doing, watching for trouble that didn't come. Yet. Evening fell quiet and cool. They ate supper together at the kitchen table, Mara having transformed the simple ingredients Ethan kept on hand into something that tasted like comfort. Lily chattered about the barn cat she'd discovered, the loft where hay was stored, the way sunlight came through the windows different than in the cabin. "It's like living in a different world," she said through a mouthful of beans. "A world with more windows." "And real floors," Mara added, "and a roof that doesn't leak when it rains hard." "And Ethan," Lily continued. "The cabin didn't have Ethan." "No," Mara agreed softly. "It didn't." After supper, while Mara cleaned up despite Ethan's protests, Lily claimed his attention for a reading lesson. She was already ahead of most 6-year-olds, her intelligence sharp from Mara's dedicated teaching. They sat in the main room while she worked through a primer, her finger following each word with careful precision. "Mama says reading is freedom," Lily told him seriously. "She says as long as you can read, no one can keep knowledge from you." "Your mama's right." "She's right about lots of things. People just don't listen." Lily turned the page, then looked up at him with those two knowing eyes. "Do you listen to her?" "I try." "Good, because she's been alone a long time. Except for me, but I'm little. She needs grown-up people who listen." The observation was delivered with such casual wisdom that Ethan had to smile. "You're pretty smart for someone little." "I know. Mama says I got it from Papa. He was good with numbers and words and figuring things out." There was no sadness in her voice, just simple fact. "I wish I remembered him better. Mama tells me stories, but it's not the same as remembering." "No, it's not." They read for another hour before Mara appeared to announce bedtime. Lily protested half-heartedly, but exhaustion won out. She hugged Ethan goodnight with the easy affection she'd shown from the start, and he found himself holding on a moment longer than necessary, this small person who'd crashed into his life and rearranged everything. After Lily went upstairs, Mara returned to find Ethan still in the main room, staring into the fire he'd built more for comfort than warmth. "She's asleep already," Mara said. "I think all the excitement wore her out." "Good. She needs rest." He gestured to the chair across from him. "You should sleep too." "I will. In a bit." She sat, her hands folding in her lap with the nervous precision of someone trying to contain anxiety. "Ethan, about this morning, what you said to Crawford and the others, I meant every word." "I know, that's what scares me." She leaned forward, firelight casting shadows across her face. "You stood up for me, openly, in front of witnesses. By tomorrow, the whole town will know you're protecting Mara Hale. They'll turn on you too. Let them." "You say that now, but when it happens, when people you've done business with for years suddenly won't shake your hand, when you're excluded from meetings and deals, when your reputation is the one being shredded," her voice was rising, panic creeping in. "You don't know what it's like. You can't know until you've lived it." Ethan stood and crossed to her chair, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "You're right. I don't know what it's like. But I know what it's like to live half dead because I was too afraid to risk anything. And I know that having you and Lily here, seeing this house actually be a home instead of just a place I exist, that's worth more than Coldwater's approval ever will be. But your business will survive, or it won't. Either way, I'll still be able to look myself in the mirror." He took her hands, felt them trembling in his. "Mara, I'm not doing this because I think it'll be easy. I'm doing it because it's right. Because you deserve someone standing beside you. Because that little girl upstairs deserves to grow up knowing the world has people in it who choose kindness over gossip." Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks, and she made no move to wipe them away. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone help, how to trust that it won't all fall apart. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. And on the days when it feels impossible, we'll make it through anyway. He squeezed her hands gently. You're not alone anymore, Mara. Not unless you want to be. She shook her head, unable to speak, and Ethan pulled her into his arms. She came stiffly at first, years of isolation making the gesture foreign, but then she collapsed against him with a sob that sounded like it had been building for 4 years. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her back, murmuring wordless comfort into her hair. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. Not for this. Not for being human. He handed her his handkerchief. Feel better? A little. Mostly I feel foolish. Well, you're not. You're brave and strong, and you've survived things that would have broken most people. A few tears don't change that. Mara managed a watery smile. You're very good at this. The comforting thing. Did Sarah teach you? No. Sarah wanted me to be strong all the time, didn't have much patience for weakness, hers or mine. He settled back into his own chair. Think I learned it from Tom, actually, my brother. He used to fall apart after his wild nights, and I'd be the one putting him back together. Never thought of it as a skill until now. You must miss him. Every day, but differently now than before. Ethan poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. Before it was just pain. Missing him hurt so much I couldn't see past it. But now I can remember the good parts too. The way he'd laugh at his own terrible jokes. How he'd sing off key and not care who heard. The way he lived so big and bright even when it burned him. He sounds wonderful. He was a disaster, but yeah, he was wonderful too. Ethan looked at her across the firelight. What was Robert like? Really like, not the version you had to defend to strangers. Mara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Steady? That's the word I always come back to. Robert was steady in a way that made the world feel safer. Not boring. People thought he was boring because he didn't chase excitement, but solid, reliable. She smiled at some private memory. He proposed to me in the rain. We were walking back from the mercantile and got caught in a downpour, and instead of running for cover, he just stopped in the middle of the muddy street and asked if I'd marry him. I was soaked and shivering and probably looked like a drowned cat, and he said I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He was right. The words slipped out before Ethan could stop them. Mara's eyes snapped to his, surprise and something else flickering in their gray depths. Ethan, I'm just saying, if he saw you like that, rain-soaked and real, and that's what he thought, he was right. Ethan stood abruptly, suddenly needing distance. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's likely to be difficult. Wait. Mara stood too, crossing to him before he could escape. Thank you for all of it. The house, the protection, She gestured between them. This, whatever this is, I didn't think people like you existed anymore. People like me? Who see past the story to the person underneath? Who choose to help even when it costs them? She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and soft. Good night, Ethan. She was gone before he could respond, leaving him standing alone in the firelight with his hand pressed to his cheek where her lips had been. The house settled around him, creaking and breathing the way old houses do, but for the first time in 6 years it didn't sound lonely. Ethan checked the doors, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to his own room. Across the hall, he could hear Lily's soft snoring and the quiet rustle of Mara preparing for bed. Normal sounds, family sounds. He fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the confrontation that was surely coming, about standing between Mara and a town's judgment. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like purpose. Morning brought visitors. Ethan was feeding the horses when he heard wagons approaching, 3 of them, carrying what looked like half of Coldwater's female population. He straightened slowly, reading the intention in their faces as they climbed down. This wasn't a social call. The group was led by Margaret Henderson, Thomas Henderson's wife, and the self-appointed moral authority of Coldwater society. She was a woman built like a general and twice as inflexible, with iron gray hair pulled so tight it must have hurt and a mouth that seemed permanently pursed in disapproval. Mr. Cole, she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. We're here to speak with your housekeeper. Mrs. Hale is busy? Then she can get unbusy. This is a matter of community concern. Ethan crossed his arms. What concern would that be? The concern of having a woman of questionable character living among decent people. Of having a child raised by someone unfit for motherhood. Margaret's eyes were hard as flint. Of protecting this community from what? A widow trying to work? He stepped forward, and several of the women behind Margaret stepped back. Let me save you some time, Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Hale works for me. What she does and where she lives is my business and mine alone. If you have concerns, you can take them up with me or take them home. Those are your options. You have no idea what that woman is capable of. I know she's capable of surviving 4 years alone in the wilderness while raising a child. I know she's capable of skilled work and honest labor. What else do I need to know? Margaret's face flushed red. She murdered her husband. Prove it. Ethan's voice went cold. Right now. Show me proof. A confession? Evidence? Anything beyond gossip and spite. Everyone knows. Everyone knows nothing. Robert Hale died in an accident. The rest is just stories you tell yourselves to make your own lives feel more interesting. He looked past Margaret to the women behind her, some of whom had the grace to look ashamed. Now I'm going to ask you once to leave my property. After that, I stop being polite. From the house came Mara's voice, clear and calm. It's all right, Ethan. Let them come in if they want. I have nothing to hide. She stood on the porch in her work dress and apron, Lily visible in the doorway behind her. Every inch of her posture read dignity and quiet strength. Margaret seized the invitation like a weapon. Well, at least someone has manners. She swept past Ethan toward the house, her entourage following. Ethan caught Mara's eye, saw her almost imperceptible nod. She was ready for this, had probably been preparing for it since the moment she'd agreed to leave the cabin. He followed the women inside, positioning himself where he could intervene if needed. The women arranged themselves in his main room like an inquisition, Margaret taking the best chair as if by divine right. Mara stood before them, hands folded, waiting. Lily had disappeared upstairs, sparing her this confrontation. So, Margaret began, you've returned to Coldwater. I've accepted employment in the vicinity. I haven't returned to town itself. Semantics. You know what you've done, showing your face here again after... Margaret's lips thinned. After what happened? After my husband died in a tragic accident, you mean? After this community decided to blame me for it without evidence or trial, after I was harassed out of town for the crime of being widowed. Mara's voice never rose, but it cut like steel. Yes, I know exactly what happened. One of the younger women, someone Ethan didn't recognize, spoke up. We're here for the child's welfare. A girl that age needs proper guidance, proper education. My daughter is reading at a 4th grade level. She can identify every edible and medicinal plant in these mountains. She's learning arithmetic, geography, and natural history. Mara's chin lifted. What exactly is improper about her education? She's never been to church, Margaret interjected. Never socialized with other children. That's not natural. Neither is driving a child into the wilderness because you decided her mother was guilty of crimes she didn't commit. But we both did what we had to do. Mara moved to stand behind one of Ethan's chairs, gripping its back. I've raised my daughter with love and care and attention. She's healthy, happy, and curious about the world. If that's not enough for you, then I suggest you examine your own standards. The room erupted in whispered conversation. Margaret raised her hand for silence. The fact remains, Mrs. Hale, that you're an unsuitable guardian. The community has every right to intervene on behalf of a child at risk. My daughter is not at risk. That's not for you to decide. Margaret smiled, sharp and satisfied. We've discussed this with Reverend Matthews and several other concerned citizens. If necessary, we're prepared to petition for custody to be transferred to a more appropriate household. The threat hung in the air like poison. Mara went white, her knuckles showing bone as she gripped the chair harder. You can't, she whispered. You have no legal grounds. We have concern for a child's welfare. That's grounds enough. Margaret stood, drawing herself up to full height. Unless, of course, you'd like to leave voluntarily. Go back to wherever you've been hiding. Spare Lily the trauma of being removed from an unfit mother. Ethan had heard enough. Get out! Margaret turned to him, eyebrows raised. Excuse me? I said, get out. All of you. Right now. He moved to the door and yanked it open. You came here under the pretense of concern, but all I'm hearing is threats. Mrs. Hale has committed no crime. She's employed honestly and raising her daughter well. If you try to take that child, I'll fight you with every legal resource I have. Mr. Cole, Deputy Crawford's already been here making accusations he can't back up. You're here doing the same. I'm starting to think the real problem isn't Mrs. Hale. It's that Coldwater can't stand to admit it was wrong about her 4 years ago. He pointed to the door. So leave, and take your self-righteous crusade with you. For a moment, Margaret looked like she might refuse. Then she gathered her skirts and swept toward the exit, pausing in front of Mara. This isn't over, she said quietly. People who defy the natural order of things always pay in the end. Then I guess we'll all pay eventually, Mara replied just as quietly. Including you. The women left in a flurry of offended dignity and whispered promises. Ethan closed the door behind them and turned to find Mara collapsed in the chair she'd been gripping, all the strength drained out of her. They'll do it, she said dully. They'll petition to take Lily, and they might win. Not if we don't let them. How do we stop them? We have no power, no influence. We have truth. We have the fact that Lily's thriving, and we have me willing to testify that you're a dedicated mother and skilled worker. Ethan knelt beside her chair. But there's one thing that would make their case almost impossible. Mara looked at him, confusion and fear warring in her expression. What? Marriage. The word dropped between them like a stone. If we were married, Ethan continued slowly, working through it as he spoke, they couldn't claim Lily's in an unstable home. They couldn't say you're unfit because you'd have a husband providing for you. All their arguments about propriety and unsuitable guardianship, they'd fall apart. Ethan, that's insane. But her eyes were calculating, seeing the logic even as she rejected it. We barely know each other. We know enough. I know you're brave and capable. You know I'm decent enough to help someone who needs it. That's more than half the marriages in this territory start with. But marriage, that's forever. That's protection. For you and for Lily. He took her hands. I'm not asking for love or romance or anything you're not ready to give. I'm offering partnership, protection, a way to take their weapon and make it useless. Mara stared at him, and he watched her brilliant mind work through every angle, every implication. They'd still talk, still think terrible things. Let them think whatever they want. They can't take your daughter if she's part of a legally recognized family unit with a father figure and stable home. You'd do that? Tie yourself to me legally just to, what, prove a point? To protect you, to protect Lily, to give you the security you deserve. He squeezed her hands gently. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Just think about it. Consider whether it might be the answer we need. Before Mara could respond, small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Lily appeared, her face worried and young. Mama, are the mean ladies going to take me away? Mara pulled her daughter into her arms, and Ethan saw the decision crystallize in her eyes even before she spoke. No, baby. No one's taking you anywhere. I promise. She looked at Ethan over Lily's head, and in that look was acceptance, surrender, and something that might have been gratitude or might have been terror. Either way, it was agreement. We should talk, she said quietly. About the particulars. Ethan nodded, understanding that they'd just crossed a line from which there was no easy return. Tonight, after Lily's asleep. The rest of the day passed in strange suspension, all of them aware that something fundamental had shifted, but unable to name it fully. Lily sensed the tension and stayed close to Mara, quieter than usual. Ethan threw himself into work that didn't need doing, fixing things that weren't broken, anything to keep his hands and mind occupied. As promised, they talked that night after Lily went to bed. Not in the main room this time, but in the kitchen, across the scarred table where they'd shared so many meals. Mara had made coffee more out of habit than need, and they sat with cooling cups between them while they worked through the logistics of binding their lives together. It would be a real marriage, Mara said firmly. On paper, in church if necessary, legal in every way. I won't have them claiming it's fraud. Agreed. But sleeping arrangements stay as they are. You in your room, me and Lily in ours. Of course. And if either of us, if in the future, if circumstances change, she struggled to find the words. I won't trap you in something you come to regret. Ethan reached across the table, waiting until she put her hand in his. Mara, I'm going into this with open eyes. Whatever happens, I won't regret protecting you and Lily. That's a promise. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt or deception. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Then yes, I'll marry you. And just like that, Ethan Cole and Mara Hale sealed an agreement that would change everything, built not on love, but on something that might prove stronger, mutual protection, shared purpose, and the desperate hope that sometimes doing the right thing was enough. They told Lily the next morning over breakfast, the words coming easier than Ethan had expected. Mara explained it simply, that she and Ethan were going to get married so they could all be a real family, so no one could ever try to separate them. Lily's face had lit up with uncomplicated joy, and she'd thrown her arms around both of them with such fierce happiness that Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Does this mean I can call you Papa? Lily asked, pulling back to look at Ethan with hopeful eyes. The question caught him unprepared. He glanced at Mara, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. If you want to, he managed, but you don't have to. We can figure out what feels right as we go. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. I'll try it out, see how it sounds. She turned to her mother. Can I tell the barn cats? They should know we're going to be a family. Yes, sweetheart, go tell the cats. As soon as Lily disappeared outside, the kitchen fell into weighted silence. Mara stared into her coffee cup like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. She's happy, Ethan said. She is. Children adapt to things easier than adults. Mara finally looked up. We need to do this quickly, before Margaret Henderson has time to file any petitions, before the town can organize opposition. How quickly? This week. Tomorrow, if possible. She stood, began clearing the table with sharp, efficient movements. We'll need a license. The territorial clerk in Helena can issue one, but that's a 2-day ride. Unless, she paused, the circuit judge. Judge Morrison comes through Coldwater once a month. When's his next visit? Ethan thought back to the notices he'd seen posted. 3 days from now, Thursday. Then we get married Thursday, in Coldwater, in public, with witnesses. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she set the plates in the wash basin. We make it impossible for them to claim it's not legitimate. That means going into town, facing everyone. I know. Her voice was steady, but he could see the cost of that steadiness in the set of her shoulders. But hiding is what got us here. If we're going to do this, we do it in the light where everyone can see. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan rode into Coldwater alone the first day to speak with Judge Morrison's clerk, a nervous young man named Timothy, who nearly dropped his pen when Ethan announced his intention to marry Mara Hale. Mrs. Hale? Timothy stumbled over his words. Are you certain, Mr. Cole? Completely certain. We need the marriage recorded Thursday morning, first thing. Can that be arranged? I suppose, but Mr. Cole, people are going to talk. Let them talk, just have the paperwork ready. Word spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. By the time Ethan returned to the ranch that evening, he'd been stopped 4 times by concerned citizens offering unsolicited advice, warnings about Mara's character, and in one case, an outright plea to reconsider before ruining his life. He'd listened politely to exactly none of it. Mara spent those 3 days sewing. She'd taken apart one of her old dresses, a dove-gray wool that had been her Sunday best in another life, and was remaking it into something suitable for a wedding. Ethan would find her at the kitchen table late into the night, needle flashing by lamplight, her face set in concentration that looked like meditation or prayer. You don't have to make something new, he told her on the second night. What you have is fine. It's not about fine. It's about walking into that town looking like a woman who has nothing to apologize for. She held up the bodice she'd been working on, checking the line of the seams. They're expecting me to slink in like a beggar grateful for your charity. I'm going to walk in like a bride. The dress took shape under her skilled hands. Simple but elegant, with clean lines that spoke to quality rather than ostentation. She'd found lace somewhere in her carefully packed belongings, yellowed with age but still beautiful, and used it to trim the collar and cuffs. It was a dress that said dignity and worth and refusal to be diminished. On Wednesday evening, Lily insisted on trying on her own best dress, the blue wool coat transformed into a Sunday frock with Mara's clever tailoring. She paraded around the kitchen while Mara and Ethan watched, and the domesticity of it struck Ethan with unexpected force. This was what family looked like. This was what he'd been missing for 6 years without knowing it. "You look beautiful," Mara told her daughter, voice soft with love. "Like a princess? Like yourself, which is better." That night, after Lily went to bed, Ethan found Mara on the porch again. She'd taken to spending time there in the evenings, wrapped in a shawl against the November cold, staring out at the darkness like she was memorizing it. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her on the steps. "Hundredth thoughts, maybe. Second implies I've stopped thinking about it, and I haven't." She pulled the shawl tighter. "Tomorrow, we walk into town and tell them they were wrong about me, that I'm worthy of marriage and family and a normal life. Part of me wants to believe it. Part of me is terrified they're right, and I'm the one who's been lying to myself for 4 years. They're not right." "You sound so certain." "I am certain. I've seen who you are, Mara, how you love Lily, how you work, how you've survived things that would have destroyed lesser people. That's not the profile of someone unworthy. That's the profile of someone extraordinary." She turned to look at him, and the moonlight caught the shine of tears on her cheeks. "You keep saying things like that. Things that make me want to believe in possibilities I gave up on." "Like what?" "Like maybe I could have more than just survival. Like maybe there's still good things waiting for me in this life." She wiped at her eyes impatiently. "It's dangerous, letting myself hope. Hope is what gets you hurt. Hope is also what gets you through." Ethan shifted closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. "I spent 6 years without hope. Just existing day to day, working myself into exhaustion so I wouldn't have to feel anything. It was safe, but it was also a kind of death. And then Lily showed up at my fence and asked if I was sad, and somehow that tiny question cracked something open, made me remember what it felt like to want something beyond just making it to tomorrow." "What do you want, Ethan?" The question was quiet, almost hesitant. He thought about it, really considered what the truth was. "I want this," he said finally. "Whatever this is we're building. You, me, Lily, I want it to be real. Not just a strategy to keep the town at bay, but something that matters, something that lasts." Mara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm so afraid I'll disappoint you." "You won't. You don't know that. I'm broken in ways I don't even understand yet. 4 years of hiding, of teaching myself to be small and silent and invisible, that doesn't just go away because we say some words in front of a judge. I don't expect it to go away. I just expect we'll figure it out together." He finally reached for her hand, was grateful when she didn't pull away. "I'm broken too, Mara. We can be broken together and maybe, piece by piece, help each other heal." She laced her fingers through his, and they sat like that in the cold darkness while the stars wheeled overhead and the future rushed toward them like a river they couldn't stop. Thursday morning arrived clear and cold, the kind of November day that promised winter wasn't far behind. Mara was up before dawn, though Ethan heard her moving around long before that. Restless feet on the floorboards, water running, the quiet sounds of someone preparing for battle. When she came downstairs, she took his breath away. The gray dress fit her perfectly, emphasizing her tall frame and straight shoulders. She'd done something with her hair, pulling it back in an intricate braid that looked both simple and elegant. The yellowed lace at her collar caught the morning light. She wore no jewelry except for a simple wooden locket that Ethan had never seen before. "Robert's mother gave me this," she said, touching it when she noticed him looking. "Day of our wedding. It has a lock of his baby hair inside. I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought he should be there today. In some way. He'd be proud of you." "Would he?" Her smile was sad. "I'm marrying another man to protect our daughter from the people who killed him with their lies. I'm not sure pride is the right word." "He'd be grateful then. That Lily has someone else willing to stand for her. Ethan straightened his own clothes, his best shirt, a vest that didn't smell like horses, trousers without patches. You ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Lily thundered down the stairs in her blue dress, hair brushed smooth and tied with a ribbon Mara must have made from scrap fabric. She looked between the two adults and seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Are we going to town now? She asked quietly. Yes, baby, we're going to town. Mara knelt to her daughter's level. And people might say unkind things. They might stare or whisper. But you remember what I taught you. Other people's unkindness says everything about them and nothing about us. Understand? Yes, Mama. And you stay close to me or Ethan. You don't go anywhere alone, promise? I promise. The ride into Coldwater felt longer than the 8 miles it actually was. Ethan drove the wagon while Mara sat beside him, spine straight as iron, Lily tucked between them. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the creak of wheels, the thud of hooves, and the wind through the bare branches. They crested the final hill and Coldwater spread below them, a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a main street, smoke rising from chimneys, the church steeple pointing skyward like an accusation. It wasn't much of a town, never had been, but it had been Mara's home once, the place where she'd built a life with Robert, where she'd brought Lily into the world. Last chance, Ethan said quietly. We can turn around, find another way. Mara's jaw set in a line he was beginning to recognize. No, we face this now. They rolled into town just as people were starting their day. Shopkeepers opening doors, women heading to the general store, men gathering outside the saloon that opened too early and closed too late. Every head turned as the wagon passed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Ethan felt the weight of their stares like physical things. He pulled up in front of the territorial office where Judge Morrison held court during his monthly visits. The building was small and official-looking, with a sign out front announcing the judge's presence. Timothy, the clerk, stood in the doorway, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Cole, he managed. Mrs. Hale, the judge he's expecting you. Ethan helped Mara down from the wagon, then lifted Lily. A crowd was already forming, drawn by the spectacle of Mara Hale returning to Coldwater. He recognized Margaret Henderson's iron-gray hair, Deputy Crawford's suspicious scowl, Bill Mason's sneering face. Others he knew only as customers or neighbors, people he'd done business with, people who were now looking at him like he'd lost his mind. Stay close, he murmured to Mara, not planning on going anywhere. They walked into the territorial office together, Lily's hand in Mara's and Mara's other hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm. Judge Morrison sat behind a scarred desk, a man in his 60s with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness that had survived 3 decades on the bench. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Hale. He stood, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. I understand you wish to be married. Yes, sir. Ethan remained standing, one hand on the back of Mara's chair. As soon as possible, if that can be arranged. Morrison's gaze moved between them, assessing. I'll be direct. This town has opinions about this union, strong opinions. Before I proceed, I need to be certain you both understand what you're doing. We understand perfectly, Mara said, her voice steady and clear. We're 2 adults choosing to marry for practical and personal reasons. The town's opinions are not relevant to that decision. The town's opinions will affect your lives considerably, Mrs. Hale. They already have. For 4 years, I've lived according to this town's opinions, hiding in the wilderness because lies and gossip made it impossible to exist here openly. I'm done living that way. She met the judge's eyes without flinching. I'm marrying Mr. Cole because he's a good man who's willing to stand with me, because my daughter deserves a stable home, and because I have every right to build a new life regardless of what Coldwater thinks about it. Morrison's expression softened slightly. And you, Mr. Cole? You're willing to attach yourself to a woman this town has condemned, rightly or wrongly? Wrongly, Ethan said firmly. And yes, I'm willing, more than willing, honored, actually. The judge studied them both for another long moment, then nodded. Very well. Do you have witnesses? No, sir. We weren't sure who... Timothy, Morrison called. Come in here and fetch Mrs. Brennan from the boarding house if she's available. Timothy scurried to comply, and within minutes returned with a woman Ethan vaguely recognized, Sarah Brennan's aunt, which felt like either cosmic irony or divine intervention. He couldn't decide which. Mrs. Brennan looked surprised, but not unkind, her eyes going to Mara with something that might have been sympathy. "You're willing to witness this marriage?" Morrison asked her. "I am." She settled into a chair, smoothing her skirts. "Though I expect I'll hear about it from my niece." "Sarah married a banker in Denver 2 years ago," Ethan said quietly. "I don't think she much cares what I do anymore." "Perhaps, but Helena Brennan remembers everyone's business." The woman smiled slightly. "Doesn't mean I won't witness yours. Seems like these two have enough people against them. Could use someone willing to stand neutral." The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike. Morrison read the legal requirements in a voice that had married hundreds of couples and buried just as many. Ethan and Mara repeated the words, their voices steady despite everything. When it came time for a ring, Ethan pulled out a simple gold band he'd commissioned from the town blacksmith 3 days ago, plain and unadorned, but real gold, solid and permanent. "With this ring," he said, sliding it onto Mara's finger, "I thee wed." Mara stared at the ring like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Her eyes were wet when she looked up at him, but she was smiling, small and tremulous, but genuine. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Morrison concluded. "Mr. Cole, you may kiss your bride if you're so inclined." It was perfunctory, expected, but when Ethan leaned in, Mara met him halfway. The kiss was brief and chaste, nothing passionate or overwhelming, but it felt like a promise anyway, like sealing something that mattered. Lily, who had been remarkably quiet through the whole proceeding, chose that moment to cheer. The sound broke the solemnity, made Morrison chuckle, and Mrs. Brennan smile outright. "Congratulations," the judge said, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish. "You're legally bound in the eyes of the territory, and should you care, in the eyes of heaven. May you have a long and prosperous union." They signed the certificate, first Ethan, then Mara, her handwriting elegant despite her shaking hands. Timothy and Mrs. Brennan added their signatures as witnesses. It was done, legal and binding and irrevocable. "There's a crowd outside," Morrison said as he filed the papers. "Might want to brace yourselves." They emerged into bright November sunlight to find half of Coldwater gathered in the street. The mood was hostile, faces ranging from shocked to outraged to disgusted. Margaret Henderson stood at the front of the crowd like a general preparing for battle. "This is a travesty," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A mockery of the sacred institution of marriage. Judge Morrison, I'm appalled you'd participate in this farce." "I've married 2 consenting adults according to territorial law," Morrison replied from the doorway. "Your personal feelings about it are irrelevant, Mrs. Henderson." "Irrelevant? When this man has been deceived into marrying a murderer?" "Careful, Margaret," Morrison's voice went hard. "That's slander unless you can prove it in a court of law. Can you?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Margaret's face flushed red, but she had no answer. Deputy Crawford stepped forward. "Judge, with all respect, the town has concerns about the welfare of the child. Mrs. Hale, Mrs. Cole now, I suppose, has been living in unstable conditions, raising that little girl in the wilderness like some kind of savage. The child looks healthy, well-dressed, and remarkably well-behaved to me," Morrison interrupted. "Better than half the children I see whose parents consider themselves respectable. Unless you have evidence of actual harm or neglect, Deputy, I suggest you keep your concerns to yourself." Ethan felt Mara's hand tighten on his arm. He covered it with his own, a gesture of solidarity and protection. "We don't owe any of you an explanation," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded street. "But I'll give you one anyway. Mara is my wife now. Lily is my daughter. We're a family legally recognized and properly established. Whatever you think happened 4 years ago, whatever lies you've told yourselves to justify how you treated a grieving widow, that's your burden to carry, not ours." "You're making a mistake, Cole," Thomas Henderson called from somewhere in the crowd. "When she shows her true colors, when the evil in her comes out, The only evil I see is a town full of people who drove a woman into hiding because she made a more interesting villain than victim. Ethan's voice was hard as stone now. You want to talk about evil? Talk about spreading lies about a woman whose husband just died. Talk about terrorizing a mother and child until they felt safer in the wilderness than among civilized people. Talk about deciding someone's guilt without evidence, trial, or the basic decency of doubt. The crowd went silent, shocked. It was one thing to whisper accusations in private. It was another to have them thrown back publicly, laid bare for the ugliness they were. Bill Mason found his voice first. You weren't here. You don't know what she's capable of. I know she's capable of surviving 4 years alone while raising a brilliant, kind daughter. I know she's capable of skilled work and honest living. What I don't know is what any of you are capable of, except cruelty dressed up as righteousness. Ethan looked around at faces he'd done business with, people he'd considered neighbors if not friends. We're leaving now. We're going home, our land, our life. And we're going to build something good there despite all of you, because that's what decent people do. He helped Mara into the wagon, lifted Lily up beside her. The crowd parted silently as he climbed up and took the reins. For a moment, the only sound was leather creaking and horses shifting their weight. Then a voice called out, young, female, uncertain. Mrs. Cole? I wanted to say congratulations. Ethan turned to see a girl barely out of her teens standing at the edge of the crowd. She looked terrified but determined, her hands twisting in her apron. Thank you, Mara said quietly. I remember when you lived here before. You mended my Sunday dress when I tore it, didn't charge my mother anything because you knew we were struggling. The girl's voice grew stronger. You were kind to me when nobody else was. I never believed what they said about you. I'm glad you're happy now. Another voice joined hers, old Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. She helped me when my Arthur died too, sat with me all night so I wouldn't be alone, never asked for anything in return. More voices scattered through the crowd, people remembering kindnesses they'd forgotten or chosen to ignore. Not everyone. Margaret Henderson and her core supporters stood silent and furious, but enough. Enough to matter. Mara's eyes were streaming now, tears she didn't bother to hide. Thank you, she said again, louder this time. All of you, for remembering, for having the courage to speak up. Ethan snapped the reins and the wagon rolled forward. The crowd parted, some people nodding as they passed, others looking ashamed, a few still glaring with undiminished hatred. They made it to the edge of town before Mara finally let herself break, burying her face in her hands while her shoulders shook with silent sobs. It's all right, Lily said, patting her mother's arm with small, gentle hands. You were so brave, Mama, like the princess defending her castle. I don't feel brave, Mara whispered. I feel terrified. Brave and terrified aren't opposites, Ethan said. They're usually the same thing. They rode in silence for a while, putting distance between themselves and Coldwater. The land opened up around them, rolling hills, stands of pine, the mountains rising purple in the distance. Home territory, safe territory. Finally, Mara raised her head, wiping at her eyes. Did that really just happen? Are we actually married? According to Judge Morrison and the territory of Montana, yes. Ethan glanced at the ring on her finger, the gold bright against her work-worn hand. How does it feel? Strange, terrifying, like I jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. She looked at him, really looked at him. Thank you for what you said back there, for standing up for us. I meant every word. I know, that's what makes it so... She stopped, struggling for the right description. So overwhelming. I've been alone so long, having someone stand beside me, speak for me, protect me. I forgot what that felt like. You're not alone anymore. Neither of us are. He paused. Is that okay? Are you okay with all of this? Mara considered the question seriously. Ask me in a month or a year. Right now I'm still trying to process that I'm married to a man I met less than 2 months ago, that we just publicly defied an entire town, and that apparently some people actually remembered I was a human being worth defending. That girl, the one who spoke up first, Emma Lawson. Her mother died when she was 12, The dress was for the funeral, but it got caught on a nail and tore right down the back the morning of the service. She was hysterical, thought she'd have to go in everyday clothes and shame her mother's memory. Mara's voice went soft with the memory. I stayed up all night remaking it, made it better than it had been. She cried when I gave it back. You do that a lot, don't you? Kindness when people least expect it. Did it, past tense. Haven't had the opportunity for 4 years. She touched the ring again, turning it on her finger. Maybe now I will again. They arrived back at the ranch to find everything exactly as they'd left it. Animals fed, house standing, the world unchanged despite the fact that everything had changed. Ethan helped his wife down from the wagon, and the word felt foreign in his mind. Wife. Mara Cole. The woman living in his house was legally bound to him now, for better or worse. I should start dinner, Mara said, but she didn't move, just stood there in her gray dress, looking at the house like she was seeing it differently. Or we could just sit for a bit, process everything that happened. Ethan gestured to the porch steps. No need to rush into normalcy. So they sat, husband, wife, and daughter, on the steps of a ranch house in Montana, while the afternoon sun tracked across the sky and the future spread out before them like uncharted territory. Lily lasted about 5 minutes before she got bored and ran off to tell the barn cats about the wedding. That left Ethan and Mara alone in the kind of silence that felt full rather than empty. What happens now? Mara asked finally. Now we figure out how to be married, I suppose, whatever that means for us. Most married couples share a bedroom. The statement hung between them, not quite a question, but not a question either. Ethan felt heat rise in his face. We agreed that wasn't necessary. That hasn't changed just because we said some words in front of a judge. I know. I'm just acknowledging reality, that people will expect certain things, that the arrangement we have isn't exactly conventional. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. Do you regret it? Marrying me? Not even a little bit. You? I don't know yet. Ask me when the fear wears off. She rested her chin on her knees. I keep waiting for something terrible to happen, for the other shoe to drop. 4 years of hiding taught me that good things don't last, that safety is temporary. Part of me is convinced this will all fall apart. Maybe it will. Or maybe we'll build something that holds. Ethan shifted to look at her profile. I'm not going to promise you perfect, Mara. I'm going to promise you honest. I'll be honest about what I can give, what I can't, what I'm figuring out as I go. And I'll need you to do the same. I can do honest. She turned her head to meet his eyes. Honest is I'm scared most of the time, that I don't know how to be a wife again, or if I even remember how to be a person who exists in the world instead of hiding from it. That some days I wake up and can't remember why I thought any of this was a good idea. And other days? Other days I look at Lily playing in the sun, safe and happy, and I think maybe we did the impossible. Maybe we actually won. Her smile was small and uncertain. Today feels like one of those days. Despite everything, despite the fear and the crowd and Margaret Henderson's fury, we won. We did. Ethan found himself smiling too. We walked into that town, faced down their judgment, and walked out married. If that's not winning, I don't know what is. They sat together as the light shifted toward evening, not touching, but close. Two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. It wasn't romance and it wasn't passion, but it was something, partnership maybe, or the beginning of trust. When Lily returned, breathless and full of stories about how the cats had reacted to the news of the wedding, they went inside together. Mara cooked dinner while Ethan set the table, Lily chattering between them, and the domestic routine felt both familiar and brand new. This was marriage, apparently. This quiet collaboration, this shared space, this feeling of building something together even when you weren't sure what the finished product would look like. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house had settled into darkness, Ethan found Mara in the kitchen again. She'd changed into her regular clothes but still wore the ring, and she was standing at the window looking out at nothing. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. She glanced at him. Did you mean it? What you said in town about building something good. Every word. Then I want to try. She turned to face him fully. I want to try to be more than just two people protecting a child. I want to try to actually be married, in whatever way that works for us. Not because we have to for appearances, but because—" She stopped, searching for words. "Because I think maybe we could be happy, if we let ourselves." Ethan crossed to her, close enough to see the hope and fear warring in her expression. "I want that too. It won't be easy. I'm difficult and damaged, and I don't know how to trust people anymore. And I'm grief-stuck and solitary, and I've forgotten how to let people in. We're quite a pair." He reached for her hand, the one wearing his ring. "But maybe that's perfect. Maybe we're exactly what each other needs." Mara's fingers curled around his, holding tight. "Kiss me again. Like you mean it this time." So he did. Not the perfunctory kiss from the ceremony, but something real and searching, a question and an answer both. Mara kissed him back with a hunger that spoke to 4 years of isolation, of skin hunger and loneliness, and the desperate need to be seen as something other than a villain or a victim. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Mara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That was— yeah." Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "It was. I don't know what happens next." "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the dark kitchen of a ranch house in Montana, two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. Outside, the wind moved through the trees and the stars wheeled overhead, and the future waited, patient and unknowable. When they finally separated, Mara headed for the stairs. She paused on the first step, looking back. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for choosing us, for choosing me. Thank you for letting me." She smiled then, genuine and warm, and climbed the stairs to bed. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen for a while longer, touching his lips where hers had been, feeling the shape of the future settling around him like a coat that might actually fit. He'd told her they'd figure it out, and he meant it. They had time now, legally married, publicly acknowledged, protected by law and witnesses. Time to figure out what this marriage would become, time to let whatever was growing between them take root and flourish. Or maybe it would fail. Maybe the weight of their respective damage would prove too much. Maybe Coldwater's hostility would erode what they were trying to build. But standing there in his kitchen, that was now their kitchen, in a house that was now their home, Ethan found himself believing in possibility for the first time in 6 years. Believing that maybe broken people could heal each other. That maybe love didn't have to be lightning and passion and overwhelming feeling. Maybe it could be quiet choice, daily effort, two people deciding over and over to stand together. He checked the doors, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to his room. Across the hall, he could hear Lily's soft breathing and Mara's quieter movements as she prepared for sleep. His family. The word still felt foreign, but less so now, more like something he could grow into, given time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The town would continue to talk. Margaret Henderson wouldn't give up her crusade easily, and there would be 100 small battles to fight as they figured out how to be husband and wife in truth instead of just on paper. But tonight, they'd won. They'd stood in the light and claimed each other, and that victory was enough to carry them into whatever came next. Ethan fell asleep thinking about Mara's smile, about Lily's joy, about the feeling of building something that mattered, and for the first time since his brother died, his dreams were kind. The week after the wedding passed in a strange rhythm of normalcy and newness. They woke together under the same roof, shared meals at the same table, worked side by side through the daily tasks that kept a ranch running. But they were still learning each other, the 1,000 small gestures and preferences that made up a shared life. Ethan discovered that Mara hummed while she sewed, wordless melodies that sounded like lullabies. Mara learned that Ethan talked to the horses like they were people, conducting full conversations that the animals seemed to appreciate. Lily watched them both with the satisfied expression of someone who'd orchestrated a great victory. On the 8th day, trouble arrived in the form of official correspondence. Ethan found the envelope nailed to his fence post when he went out to check the cattle. Heavy paper, sealed with wax, addressed to Mr. Ethan Cole and Mrs. Mara Cole, in formal script that made his stomach drop. He carried it back to the house, where Mara was kneading bread dough with the focused intensity she brought to all physical tasks. "We got a letter," he said, setting it on the table. Mara's hands stilled. She wiped flour on her apron, staring at the envelope like it might contain a snake. From? Don't know. It's sealed. He waited, letting her decide when to open it. She picked it up finally, broke the seal with one quick motion like ripping off a bandage. Her eyes scanned the contents, and Ethan watched the color drain from her face. What is it? Petition for custody review. Her voice was flat, dead. Margaret Henderson and the Coldwater Ladies Moral Society are requesting the territorial court review Lily's living situation. They're claiming that despite the marriage, I remain an unfit guardian due to, she read from the letter, due to documented history of moral deficiency, unstable mental state, and the suspicious circumstances surrounding my first husband's death. Ethan felt rage bloom hot in his chest. They can't do this. We're legally married. Lily has 2 parents, a stable home. They can do whatever they want, file whatever petitions they want. Mara set the letter down carefully, like it might shatter. And some judge somewhere might decide they're right, that a woman once accused of murder shouldn't be raising a child, married or not. When's the hearing? 3 weeks. Territorial courthouse in Helena. She laughed, bitter and sharp. They timed it perfectly, right before winter really sets in when travel's difficult, when gathering witnesses and mounting a defense will be nearly impossible. Ethan grabbed his coat. I'm writing to Helena today, finding a lawyer. We'll fight this. With what money? Lawyers cost? I don't care what they cost. I'll sell cattle, I'll mortgage the land, I'll do whatever it takes. He was already moving toward the door. They're not taking Lily. I won't let them. Mara caught his arm, stopping him. Ethan, wait, just wait. She was trembling, he realized, not with fear, but with something else, something that looked like rage finally given permission to exist. We can't just throw money at this. We need strategy. We need to understand what we're actually fighting. We're fighting lies. No, we're fighting the truth they've decided is more convenient than facts. She pulled him back to the table, forced him to sit. Margaret Henderson doesn't actually care about Lily's welfare. This is about power, about punishing me for daring to come back, for daring to be happy. If we fight this like it's about Lily, we'll lose. We need to make it about what it actually is. A personal vendetta disguised as moral concern. Ethan looked at his wife and saw the brilliant, strategic mind she'd been hiding behind 4 years of survival. What do you suggest? We go to Helena? Yes. We get a lawyer? Absolutely. But we also gather evidence. Not just character witnesses saying I'm a good mother. They'll dismiss those as biased. We need documentation, proof that Lily's thriving, that I've been a competent parent despite impossible circumstances. Mara's eyes were fierce now, all trace of fear burned away by purpose. And we need to expose Margaret's real motivation, show that this isn't about protecting a child, it's about destroying a woman who refused to be destroyed. How do we prove that? We start by talking to people who know the truth, people who were there 4 years ago when Robert died, people who might be willing to testify that the accusations against me were always baseless. She stood, began pacing. Emma Lawson, Mrs. Patterson. Even your Mrs. Brennan. She witnessed our marriage, she knows some of the history. There were others too, people who didn't believe the lies but were too afraid to speak up. Maybe now, with time past and the stakes clear, they'll find their courage. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her nightdress. Are the mean people trying to take me away again? Mara's face crumpled for just a second before she pulled it back together. She knelt in front of her daughter, taking small hands in her larger ones. They're trying, baby, but we're not going to let them succeed. Because we're a family now, Papa won't let them. The word, Papa, hit Ethan like a fist to the chest. Lily had been trying it out all week, testing how it sounded. And each time it carried more certainty, more claim. That's right, he said, his voice rough. I won't let them, I promise. Promises are important, Lily said seriously. Mama says you should never make a promise you can't keep. Then it's a good thing I can keep this one. They spent the day planning. Mara made lists in her precise handwriting, people to contact, evidence to gather, questions that needed answering. Ethan wrote to a lawyer in Helena that Judge Morrison had mentioned, explaining the situation and requesting immediate counsel. By evening, they had the skeleton of a defense and the beginning of hope. The next morning, Ethan rode into Coldwater alone. Mara had wanted to come, but they'd agreed it was better if he went first. Test the waters, see who might be willing to help without the complication of Mara's presence making people defensive or afraid. He found Emma Lawson working in her father's general store, stocking shelves with the kind of concentration that suggested she was trying to become invisible. She startled when Ethan said her name. "Mr. Cole, congratulations on your marriage." She glanced toward the back of the store where her father was counting inventory. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Need to ask you something. In private, if possible." Emma's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Pa, I'm taking my break." They stepped into the alley behind the store, where November wind cut sharp between buildings. Emma wrapped her shawl tighter, waiting. "The Ladies' Moral Society is trying to take Lily away from Mara," Ethan said without preamble, "claiming she's an unfit mother. There's going to be a hearing in Helena in 3 weeks. Emma's face went pale. "They can't. After everything, they're still—" She stopped, steadied herself. "What do you need from me?" "The truth. Testimony about who Mara really is. About the kindness you mentioned at the wedding. About anything you remember from when Robert died that might prove the accusations against her were lies. I was only 14 when Mr. Hale died. I don't know if my testimony would matter." "It would matter. You're old enough to testify, and you spoke up when no one else would. That takes courage, Emma. The kind of courage a judge might respect." Ethan paused. "I know it's asking a lot. That speaking against the Ladies' Society could cost you in this town." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young face showing the weight of the decision. Then she straightened her shoulders in a gesture that reminded Ethan powerfully of Mara. "Mrs. Hale, Mrs. Cole, saved me when I was drowning in grief, made it possible for me to bury my mother with dignity. The least I can do is tell the truth about who she really is." She met his eyes. "I'll testify, whatever you need." Ethan found similar courage in unexpected places over the next 2 weeks. Mrs. Patterson agreed to testify about Mara's character during her marriage to Robert. Helena Brennan, despite her niece's disapproval, provided a written statement about witnessing a marriage that appeared genuine and freely entered. Even old Doc Garrison, who'd examined Robert's body after the accident, agreed to testify that the death was clearly accidental, a broken neck consistent with being thrown from a spooked horse, nothing more sinister. But it was the visit to the livery stable that provided the most damning evidence against Margaret Henderson's crusade. Ethan found the stable owner, a gruff man named Porter, shoeing a horse with methodical precision. Porter had been in Coldwater for 30 years and had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. "Heard you married the Hale widow," Porter said without looking up from his work. "Brave or stupid, haven't decided which." "Probably both." Ethan leaned against a post. "I'm gathering testimony about Robert Hale's death. You provided the horse he was riding that day." "Wasn't my horse, was Henderson's. Thomas Henderson loaned it to Hale because his regular mount had gone lame." Porter set down the horse's hoof, finally looking at Ethan. "Told the deputy that at the time. Told anyone who'd listen. That horse was green-broke and skittish. Shouldn't have been loaned out during storm season. I said as much to Henderson, but he insisted it was fine, that Hale was experienced enough to handle it." Ethan's mind raced. "Did you testify to that anywhere official?" "Gave a statement to Crawford. Don't know what he did with it. Probably nothing, since it didn't fit the story everyone wanted to tell." Porter returned to his work. "Truth is, Henderson felt guilty about loaning that horse, guilty enough that he needed someone else to blame. And Mara Hale made a convenient target." "Would you be willing to testify to that? In court?" Porter was silent for several hammer strikes. Then he nodded. "Reckon I would. Never sat right with me, what happened to that woman. Making her pay for a man's guilt." By the time they left for Helena, 2 days before the hearing, they had 7 witnesses willing to testify on Mara's behalf and a lawyer named Samuel Cross who'd reviewed their case and declared it winnable, provided the judge is interested in facts over hysteria. The journey to Helena took 2 hard days of travel through country going gray with approaching winter. They'd left Lily with Mrs. Patterson, a decision that had cost Mara visible pain but made strategic sense. Showing up to a custody hearing with the child in question could be seen as either confidence or desperation, and they couldn't afford the wrong interpretation. Helena was bigger than Coldwater, a real town with brick buildings and multiple streets. People who didn't know or care about the gossip from a settlement 40 miles away. They stayed at a modest hotel near the courthouse, and Ethan watched Mara move through the unfamiliar space with the careful attention of someone relearning how to exist in civilization. "I'd forgotten what it was like," she said that first night, standing at the window of their room. They'd taken 2 rooms, keeping up appearances even here. Being around this many people, this much noise and movement and life happening all at once. Overwhelming? Terrifying. But also, she pressed her hand against the glass. Also exciting, like maybe I could be just another person again. Not the widow Hale, not the woman from the woods, just Mara, walking down a street. "You could be," Ethan said. "After this is over, after we win, you could be anyone you wanted." "Could I?" She turned to look at him. "Or will I always be the woman accused of murder? The one who had to prove her fitness as a mother in court?" "That'll be part of your story, but it doesn't have to be the whole story." The hearing was set for 9 in the morning. They arrived at the courthouse at 8, meeting Samuel Cross in the hallway outside the courtroom. He was younger than Ethan had expected, barely 30, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his business. "They're bringing 4 witnesses," Cross told them, reviewing his notes. "Margaret Henderson herself, Deputy Crawford, Reverend Matthews, and a doctor from Coldwater named Simmons. They'll argue that Mrs. Cole has a history of instability, that the marriage was hasty and potentially coerced, and that Lily would be better served in the care of," he checked his notes, "a respectable family that can provide proper moral guidance." "By which they mean themselves," Mara said flatly. "Most likely. Mrs. Henderson has no children of her own, and these custody battles are often about filling that void." Cross looked at Mara directly. "I need you to be prepared for them to say terrible things, to dredge up every accusation, every piece of gossip. They're going to try to make you angry, make you defensive. Don't give them that satisfaction. I spent 4 years surviving in the wilderness. I think I can survive a few hours of lies." The courtroom was smaller than Ethan had imagined, with wooden benches and a judge's bench that looked like it had been there since territorial days. Judge Thornton presided, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every excuse and lie the human mind could invent. Margaret Henderson sat at the petitioner's table with her lawyer, a severe man named Blackwood who looked like he'd been weaned on vinegar. Behind them sat the other witnesses and a handful of Coldwater citizens who'd made the journey to support the petition. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Thornton," the bailiff announced. The hearing began with opening statements. Blackwood painted a picture of Mara as an unstable woman with a dark past, someone who'd fled into the wilderness rather than face proper scrutiny, who'd now trapped an unsuspecting man into marriage to provide cover for her unfitness as a mother. He made it sound reasonable, almost compassionate, the concerned citizens just trying to protect an innocent child from a dangerous situation. Cross's opening was simpler. "Your Honor, this case is about a vendetta disguised as virtue. The petitioners aren't concerned for Lily Cole's welfare. They're concerned that Mara Cole dared to survive the destruction they attempted 4 years ago. The evidence will show that Mrs. Cole is not only a fit mother, but an exceptional one who's raised a remarkable child under impossible circumstances." Margaret Henderson was called first. She testified with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never questioned her own righteousness. She described Mara's strange behavior after Robert's death, the way she'd isolated herself, the unnatural calmness she'd shown at the funeral. She spoke of the responsibility the community felt to intervene when Lily disappeared along with her mother, the relief when they'd learned the child was still alive, and the horror upon discovering that Mara had been raising her like a savage in the wilderness. "And what made you decide to petition for custody now?" Cross asked during cross-examination. "When we learned she'd returned, when we saw that Mr. Cole had been deceived into marriage." "Deceived how?" Margaret faltered. "Well, by her nature, by the lies she must have told about her past." "Do you have evidence that Mrs. Cole lied to Mr. Cole about anything?" No, but surely." "So Mr. Cole, a grown man capable of making his own decisions, chose to marry Mrs. Cole of his own free will. And you've decided he was deceived, despite no evidence of deception. Is that correct? He doesn't know what she's capable of. What is she capable of, Mrs. Henderson, specifically? The question hung in the air. Margaret's face went red, and Ethan could see her struggling between the accusations she wanted to make and the lack of proof to support them. She killed her husband, Margaret said finally. Do you have evidence of that? Any evidence beyond gossip and assumption? Everyone knows what they've been told by people like you, but evidence, Mrs. Henderson, facts. Do you have any? The circumstances were suspicious. In what way? He died conveniently, leaving her his property. Husbands die tragically all the time, Mrs. Henderson. Are all widows suspects, or just the ones you've decided to target? Blackwood objected, but the damage was done. Cross had exposed the hollowness at the center of Margaret's certainty. Deputy Crawford fared no better. Under Cross's questioning, he admitted that no investigation had ever found evidence of foul play in Robert Hale's death. That the coroner's report clearly indicated accidental death. That Mara had never been charged with any crime because there was no crime to charge her with. Then why, Cross asked, did you suggest to Mrs. Cole 4 years ago that she might be happier somewhere else? Crawford shifted uncomfortably. The town was upset. There was talk of taking matters into their own hands. I thought it would be safer if she left. Safer for whom? For Mrs. Cole and her daughter, or for the people threatening them? I was trying to prevent violence. By encouraging the victim to flee rather than protecting her from illegal threats. I see. Cross's voice was dry as dust. And in the 4 years since, did you ever investigate who was making those threats? Did you ever arrest anyone for the vandalism and harassment that drove a widow and child into the wilderness? That's not... I couldn't prove who... You didn't try, did you, Deputy? Because that would have required admitting that Coldwater's upstanding citizens were engaging in criminal behavior. The afternoon brought Mara's witnesses. Emma Lawson testified with quiet conviction about Mara's kindness, her skill as a seamstress, the care she'd shown for others in the community. Mrs. Patterson spoke of the friendship she'd shared with Mara during Robert's life, the genuine love she'd witnessed between husband and wife. Dr. Garrison presented his medical findings about Robert's death, making it clinically clear that the injuries were consistent with being thrown from a horse and nothing else. But it was Porter, the livery stable owner, who delivered the most devastating blow to the petitioner's case. I told Deputy Crawford the day after Robert Hale died that the horse was greenbroke and shouldn't have been loaned out, Porter testified. I told him Thomas Henderson had been negligent in providing that animal during storm season. And I told him that if anyone was responsible for Mr. Hale's death, beyond the horse and the weather, it was Henderson for his poor judgment. And what happened to that statement? Cross asked. Nothing, far as I can tell. Crawford said he'd file it, but I never heard another word. And then suddenly everyone's saying Mrs. Hale killed her husband, and my statement's nowhere to be found. Cross entered into evidence the original statement, which Porter had kept a copy of. Judge Thornton read it with an expression that suggested her patience with the petitioners was wearing thin. Then it was Mara's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, wearing the gray dress she'd been married in, and carrying herself like someone who had nothing to hide. She swore her oath with a steady voice and settled into the chair, hands folded in her lap. Cross led her through the basic facts first. Her marriage to Robert, their life together, the day he died. Mara's voice stayed even, recounting details without drama or embellishment. Did you kill your husband, Mrs. Cole? No, I loved him. His death devastated me. Then why did the town decide you had? Mara was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because it made a better story than the truth. Because accidents are random and frightening, but murder has a villain you can identify and punish. And because I was convenient, young, without family in the area, different enough to be suspicious. Different how? I read too much, asked too many questions, had opinions about things women weren't supposed to have opinions about. She smiled sadly. Robert loved that about me. The town found it threatening. Cross walked her through the 4 years in the wilderness, the cabin, the garden, Lily's education, the daily work of survival. Mara described it without self-pity, just facts and choices, and the fierce determination to protect her daughter. Why come back? Cross asked. Why risk this confrontation? Because hiding was teaching Lily that the world was too dangerous to exist in openly, that we had to make ourselves small and invisible to survive. Mara's voice strengthened. I want her to grow up brave, to believe she has the right to exist fully in the world. And I can't teach her that while I'm cowering in the woods. Then it was Blackwood's turn for cross-examination. Mrs. Cole, you claim you were driven into the wilderness by harassment, yet you never reported this harassment to authorities. I reported it to Deputy Crawford. He suggested I leave town. So you chose to flee rather than fight for your home. I chose to protect my 3-year-old daughter from witnessing violence and hatred. That's not cowardice, Mr. Blackwood. That's motherhood. You raised that child in primitive conditions without proper schooling or socialization. I raised her to read, think, observe the natural world, and understand her own worth. She's reading at a 4th grade level at age 6. She can identify medicinal plants and edible foods. She's confident, curious, and kind. What exactly is improper about that education? Blackwood changed tactics. This marriage to Mr. Cole, it was rather sudden, wasn't it? We knew each other for 6 weeks before marrying, not unusually short by frontier standards. And convenient timing, just as the community was expressing concerns about your fitness as a guardian. The marriage happened because we chose it, because Ethan saw past the lies this town told about me and recognized that I was simply a woman trying to survive. Mara's eyes found Ethan in the courtroom. And because somewhere along the way, we became something more than just allies. We became family. How touching. And if this court removes your daughter from your custody, will this hasty marriage survive? The question was meant to rattle her, to suggest the marriage was purely strategic. Mara didn't flinch. I would hope so, because I've come to care for my husband quite deeply, and I believe he cares for me. But more importantly, whether it survives or not is irrelevant to the question before this court. The question is whether I'm a fit mother to my daughter, and the answer, supported by every witness and piece of evidence presented today, is yes. Cross called Ethan as the final witness. He testified about finding Mara and Lily in the cabin, the clear evidence of care and education, the way mother and daughter interacted with obvious love and respect. He spoke about his decision to marry Mara, making it clear it was his choice, freely made, based on seeing her character firsthand. Do you believe Lily is safe with her mother? Cross asked. Completely. Mara would die before letting anything harm that child. And are you prepared to be a father to Lily? Ethan looked at the judge, at Mara, at the courtroom full of people waiting to hear his answer. I already am a father to Lily. From the moment I married Mara, from the moment Lily called me Papa the first time, I became her father, and I take that responsibility as seriously as any man who's ever raised a child. The closing arguments were brief. Blackwood made one last attempt to paint Mara as dangerous and unstable, a woman whose past made her unfit regardless of present circumstances. Cross systematically dismantled every claim, pointing out the lack of evidence, the obvious bias of the petitioners, and the clear evidence that Lily was thriving under Mara's care. Your Honor, Cross concluded, this case was never about protecting a child. It's about punishing a woman for surviving, for daring to rebuild after this community tried to destroy her, for having the audacity to be happy despite their best efforts. Lily Cole is a healthy, well-educated, deeply loved child. Taking her from her mother would be the real crime here. Judge Thornton called a brief recess to review the evidence. 20 minutes felt like hours. Mara sat rigid beside Ethan, her hand crushing his, her breathing carefully controlled. When they were called back, the judge's expression was unreadable. I've reviewed the petition, the testimony, and the evidence presented by both parties, Thornton began, and I'm frankly appalled that this case was brought before me at all. Margaret Henderson made a small sound of protest. The judge silenced her with a look. The petitioners have failed to provide a single piece of concrete evidence suggesting that Lily Cole is in danger, neglected, or inadequately cared for. What they have provided is gossip, supposition, and personal animosity thinly disguised as concern for a child's welfare. Thornton looked directly at Margaret. Mrs. Henderson, your vendetta against Mrs. Cole is transparent and disturbing. That you would use a child as a weapon in that vendetta is unconscionable." She turned to Mara. "Mrs. Cole, I want to be clear. Nothing in the evidence suggests you are anything but a devoted and capable mother. The circumstances you've survived would have broken lesser people. That you emerged from 4 years of isolation with a happy, healthy, educated daughter speaks to extraordinary parenting under impossible conditions." Mara's eyes were streaming now, tears she didn't bother to hide. "The petition for custody review is denied. Lily Cole will remain in the care of her mother and stepfather. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order against the petitioners. Mrs. Henderson, you and your associates are to have no contact with the Cole family, direct or indirect. Any further harassment will result in criminal charges." Thornton's gavel came down with finality. "This court is adjourned." The courtroom erupted. Margaret Henderson was shouting something about injustice and corruption. Her supporters were crying out in protest. But Ethan heard none of it over the sound of Mara's sob as she collapsed against him, 4 years of fear and fight finally draining out of her. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's over. You won." "We won," she corrected, pulling back to look at him with a face made young by joy and relief. "We won." Cross was shaking their hands, congratulating them, explaining about the paperwork that would formalize the restraining order. Emma Lawson appeared, hugging Mara and crying happy tears. Porter nodded from across the room, a rare smile on his gruff face. They stumbled out of the courthouse into cold November air that tasted like freedom. Mara tilted her face to the sky, and Ethan watched something fundamental shift in her expression, the constant wariness, the defensive tension, finally beginning to ease. "What now?" she asked. "Now we go get our daughter and take her home." The ride back to Coldwater took them through Mrs. Patterson's boarding house first. Lily came running out before they'd even fully stopped the wagon, launching herself at Mara with such force that they both nearly fell. "You're back! Did you win? Are they going to leave us alone?" "We won, baby. They're going to leave us alone. It's over." Lily pulled back, her small face serious. "Really over? Or pretend over?" "Really over. The judge said so. We're a family, and no one can change that." "I told Mrs. Patterson you'd win. I said Papa wouldn't let them take me and Mama's too brave to lose." She looked at Ethan. "I was right, wasn't I?" "You were right." They thanked Mrs. Patterson, who refused payment for watching Lily, but accepted Mara's tearful hug. Then they headed home, the three of them crowded together on the wagon bench, Lily chattering about everything she'd done while they were gone. As they crested the hill and the ranch came into view, home, truly home now, protected and permanent, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was what he'd bought the land for 6 years ago, not to hide from grief, but to build something. He just needed the right people to build it with. The weeks that followed brought a different kind of challenge, learning to be a family not in crisis, but in peace, learning what normal looked like for them. Mara threw herself into making the house truly theirs, sewing curtains for the windows, organizing the kitchen to suit her workflow, adding small touches that transformed the place from bachelor quarters to home. She started taking sewing commissions again, carefully at first, then with growing confidence as word spread through surrounding settlements that the seamstress from Coldwater was as skilled as ever. Lily started lessons with a tutor in Helena, making the journey once a week to study with other children. The first few times were hard. She was shy around strangers, uncertain how to interact with peers, but gradually she bloomed, made friends, came home with stories about classmates and lessons, and the wonderful strangeness of being ordinary. Ethan and Mara navigated the more complicated terrain of their marriage. They were still sleeping in separate rooms, still moving carefully around the physical intimacy that marriage implied, but they'd never quite addressed. They'd kiss goodnight sometimes, brief and sweet, but neither pushed for more. Until one night in early December when Mara appeared at Ethan's door after he'd gone to bed. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting up. "Can't stop thinking." She stood in the doorway in her nightgown and robe, backlit by the hall lamp. "About us. About what we are to each other." "What do you want us to be?" "I don't know, but I know I'm tired of being careful, tired of treating this marriage like it's still just strategy." She stepped into the room. "I want it to be real, Ethan. All of it. I want to be your wife in truth, not just on paper." He stood, crossed to her slowly, giving her time to change her mind. "You're sure?" I've never been more sure of anything. Her hands came up to frame his face. You've given me everything: safety, protection, a home, a future for Lily. I want to give you something too. I want to give you me, if you'll have me. He kissed her then, deep and searching, a question that had been building for months finally finding its answer. Mara kissed him back with the hunger of someone finally allowing herself to want, to need, to hope for more than just survival. I'll have you, Ethan said against her lips. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll stay. That might be a very long time. Good. She stayed that night and the nights after, moving her things across the hall until the guest room became Lily's room alone and the master bedroom became truly theirs. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with the tenderness of people who'd both been broken and were learning how to be whole. Winter settled over Montana in earnest, bringing snow that transformed the land into something clean and new. They worked together to winterize the ranch, laid in supplies, prepared for the months of isolation ahead. But this time, isolation felt like gift rather than punishment. Time to be together without the world pressing in, time to build their family without scrutiny or judgment. Christmas came quiet and perfect. They had no money for elaborate gifts, but Mara sewed Lily a new dress, and Ethan carved her a set of wooden animals. Lily gave them both pictures she'd drawn, one of the three of them in front of the ranch house, another of the cabin in the hollow that had saved them all. I don't want to forget it, she explained. The cabin. It was scary sometimes, but it was also where we were brave, where Mama taught me that hiding could be surviving, and surviving could be winning. We won't forget, Mara promised, hanging the picture on the kitchen wall where they'd see it every day. Spring arrived eventually, as it always did, bringing thaw and green and the possibility of new beginning. With it came a letter from Samuel Cross informing them that the territory had filed charges against Deputy Crawford for destruction of evidence and dereliction of duty. Porter's statement about Robert's death had indeed been suppressed, and Crawford's actions had contributed to 4 years of illegal harassment. They're finally holding someone accountable, Mara said, reading the letter at the kitchen table. After all this time. Does it help? Knowing that? She thought about it. Yes, not because I need revenge, but because it means the truth matters, that facts matter, that justice, even delayed, is still possible. More letters came as spring deepened. Emma Lawson wrote to say she was engaged to a teacher from Helena, someone who valued her courage in testifying. Mrs. Patterson sent word that 3 more women had come forward with stories of harassment they'd endured in Coldwater, and that the Ladies' Moral Society was being investigated for their pattern of targeting widows and unmarried women. The whole thing's unraveling, Ethan observed. Once one person found the courage to speak truth, others followed. That's how it works, Mara said. Lies need silence to survive. Truth just needs one voice brave enough to start. In May, they returned to the hollow, not to stay, but to visit, to show Lily where they'd been and what they'd survived. The cabin still stood, weathered but sound, and Mara walked through it with the careful attention of someone revisiting a dream. I was so lonely here, she said, standing in the doorway. So afraid. But also, she looked at Lily playing in the clearing, at Ethan beside her. Also becoming who I needed to be. Learning how to survive, how to fight, how to believe I was worth fighting for. You were always worth fighting for. I know that now. Took me a long time to believe it, but I know it now. She took his hand. Thank you for seeing it before I could. They picnicked by the creek, the 3 of them, eating sandwiches and watching the water flow. Lily collected stones for her treasure box. Mara and Ethan sat close, shoulders touching, content in the silence. Do you ever regret it? Mara asked quietly. Marrying me? Taking on all of this? Ethan considered the question seriously. Thought about the man he'd been before that September morning when a barefoot girl asked if he was sad. Thought about the empty house and the empty days and the way he'd been slowly disappearing into grief. Not once, he said. You saved me as much as I saved you, maybe more. I think we saved each other. Yeah, I think we did. Summer brought unexpected bounty. The ranch thrived under their combined attention. Cattle multiplied, crops flourished, and Mara's sewing business grew until she was turning down commissions. They hired a ranch hand to help with the heavy work, a quiet young man named Peter who minded his own business and worked hard. Lily turned 7 in August, celebrating with a party that included her new friends from Helena and a few brave souls from Coldwater who'd maintained their friendship with Mara despite the town's disapproval. She was growing tall and clever, showing signs of both her mother's strategic mind and her father's quiet strength. When people asked if she remembered the cabin, she'd say yes, but she remembered the ranch house more clearly now. Home was here, with Mama and Papa and the barn cats and the wide Montana sky. In September, exactly 1 year after Ethan first met Lily at his fence line, Mara told him she was pregnant. They were in the kitchen, always the kitchen, their place for important conversations, and she'd made coffee even though she wasn't drinking it anymore. Ethan noticed, started to ask why, and then saw her face. "I'm with child," she said simply. 3 months along, the doctor thinks. The news hit him like lightning, illuminating everything at once. A baby. Their baby. The family they'd chosen expanding to include new life, new possibility. "Are you happy?" Mara asked, uncertain. "I know we never discussed. I wasn't sure if you wanted." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she squeaked in protest. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. She melted against him, and he felt her trembling with joy or fear or both. "I'm terrified. After everything with Lily, after fighting so hard to keep her, now there's going to be another child depending on me. Another person I could fail." "You won't fail. You've never failed. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm really not. I'm just someone who keeps going because stopping isn't an option." She pulled back to look at him. "But with you here, with this life we've built, maybe I can be strong enough for this too." "You already are. We both are." They told Lily that evening, expecting excitement. Instead, her face went through a complicated series of expressions before settling on serious. "A baby brother or sister?" "We don't know yet," Mara said. "But yes, a baby." "And you'll still love me? Even when there's a baby?" Mara's heart broke and mended in the same moment. She knelt in front of her daughter, taking small hands in larger ones. "Oh, sweetheart. Having another child doesn't divide love, it multiplies it. We'll love this baby with our whole hearts, and we'll love you with our whole hearts. There's always enough love. Promise?" "I promise, the most important promise I can make." Lily processed this, her clever mind working through implications, then she nodded, satisfied. "Okay, then I'll help. I'll be the best big sister ever." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Mara bloomed with it, her body finally soft and curved instead of hard and thin from years of survival. Ethan caught himself staring sometimes, overwhelmed by the miracle of it. This woman who'd been driven into the wilderness, who'd survived the impossible, now carrying their child with such obvious joy. In February, on a night when the snow fell soft and silent outside, their son was born. The labor was hard but quick, attended by Doc Garrison, who'd made the journey from Coldwater specifically for this birth, wanting to see Mara Cole, bring new life into the world after fighting so hard to protect the life she already had. "A boy," Garrison announced, placing the squalling infant on Mara's chest. "Healthy lungs, all his fingers and toes. You did well, Mara." She was crying and laughing at the same time, cradling the baby with shaking hands. "Ethan, look at him." Ethan looked at his son, red-faced and furious at being born, already showing signs of Mara's stubborn chin and his own dark hair. Love hit him like a physical force, so strong he had to sit down or risk falling. "He's perfect," he managed. "What should we name him?" Mara asked. They'd discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his newborn son, Ethan knew. "Thomas," he said, "after my brother, if that's all right with you." Mara's eyes went soft. "Thomas Robert Cole, after both the men who brought us here." So Thomas Robert Cole entered the world on a February night in Montana, welcomed by parents who'd chosen each other and a sister who'd already appointed herself his protector. They were a family built from loss and choice, and the stubborn refusal to let the world define them. Spring came again, bringing with it the miracle of Thomas's smile and Lily's pride in her baby brother. Mara recovered quickly, her body remembering this work, and soon she was back to sewing and managing the house and mothering with the fierce competence Ethan had first witnessed in a hidden hollow. In April, they received an unexpected visitor. Margaret Henderson appeared at their fence line, thinner than Ethan remembered, her proud bearing diminished by something that looked like shame. "I don't expect you to let me in," she said when Ethan met her at the gate. "I don't deserve that courtesy. But I need to say something, and I need Mrs. Cole, Mara, to hear it." Ethan studied her, looking for tricks or malice, found only exhaustion and what might have been genuine remorse. "Wait here." He fetched Mara, who came outside with Thomas on her hip and Lily hovering protectively behind her. She looked at Margaret with an expression Ethan couldn't read. "Mrs. Henderson." "Mrs. Cole," Margaret swallowed hard. "I came to apologize. Not to ask forgiveness, I don't deserve that, but to apologize for what I did, what I tried to do, the pain I caused." Mara said nothing, just waited. "My husband and we couldn't have children. The doctor said it was impossible, and I think I resented you for having what I couldn't, for surviving Robert's death and still having Lily when I had nothing." Margaret's voice was thick with tears. "It doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses that. But I need you to know it wasn't really about you. It was about my own pain poisoning everything I touched." "That's still not an excuse," Mara said quietly. "Your pain was real, but you used it as a weapon. Against me, against Lily, against anyone who reminded you of what you'd lost." I know that now. Thomas left me, my husband. Said he couldn't live with the woman I'd become. Said the guilt of Robert's death and what happened after had made me monstrous." She wiped at her eyes. "He was right. I became something monstrous. And I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry." Mara shifted Thomas to her other hip, considering. Ethan stayed ready to intervene if needed, but Mara's face held no fear, only calculation. "I accept your apology," she said finally, "not because what you did is forgivable, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. You've already taken enough from me. I won't give you my peace too." Margaret nodded, unable to speak. "But Margaret, you need to do more than apologize to me. You need to examine how you treat every woman who threatens you with their strength or their survival. You need to dismantle whatever made you think cruelty was justified." Mara's voice was firm but not unkind. "You need to do better, be better, for your own sake, if nothing else." "I'm trying. I've left Coldwater. I'm going to live with my sister in Oregon. Start over somewhere people don't know what I've done." Margaret looked at Lily, at Thomas, at the family standing united before her. I hope you're happy. All of you. I hope you build something beautiful here." "We already have," Mara said. They watched Margaret leave, her wagon disappearing down the road toward whatever redemption she might find. Lily tugged on Mara's skirt. "Was that brave, Mama? Accepting her apology?" "I think so. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting go of the right to stay angry." Mara looked down at her daughter. "But it's also important to remember that accepting an apology doesn't mean trusting again. She said she was sorry, and I believe her, but that doesn't erase what she did or make us friends. I understand, like how I forgave Billy for breaking my slate, but I still don't let him borrow my things." Exactly like that. Summer rolled toward them warm and golden, bringing long days and the sweet exhaustion of good work. They celebrated their second wedding anniversary in June with a party that brought together all the people who'd stood with them: Emma and her new husband, Mrs. Patterson, Porter, Doc Garrison, Helena Brennan, and even a few faces from Coldwater who'd found their courage. 2 years, Mara marveled, dancing with Ethan in the yard while fiddle music played and children ran wild. Feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once. Any regrets? Only that I didn't find you sooner. That we lost 4 years we could have been building this. She rested her head on his chest. But maybe we needed those years. Needed the breaking before we could figure out how to put ourselves back together. Maybe. He kissed the top of her head. I'm just grateful we found our way here. to this, to us. The party went late, filled with laughter and music and the joy of people who'd survived and chosen to celebrate that survival. When it finally ended and the last guests had gone home, Ethan and Mara sat on their porch steps, the same steps where they'd had so many important conversations, and watched the stars. "What do you think happens next?" Mara asked. "For us? For the children? For all of this we've built?" "I think we keep building, keep choosing each other, keep teaching Lily and Thomas that they're worthy of love and protection, keep showing Coldwater that we're not going anywhere." Ethan laced his fingers through hers. "And maybe someday, when we're old and gray, we'll look back on all of this and marvel that it started with a lonely man and a hidden cabin and a brave little girl who asked if I was sad." "Are you still sad?" Ethan thought about the question that had started everything, thought about who he'd been that September morning, isolated, grief-stuck, half alive. Thought about who he was now, husband, father, partner, in building something that mattered. "No," he said, "I'm not sad anymore. I'm happy. Genuinely, remarkably happy." "Me too." Mara squeezed his hand. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen and the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the house, Thomas fussed and Lily's voice soothed him. The sound of family, of life, of everything they'd fought so hard to protect. This was what victory looked like, Ethan thought. Not dramatic or overwhelming, but quiet and persistent and deeply, undeniably real. They'd faced down judgment and lies and the worst parts of human nature, and they'd won by simply refusing to be defeated, by choosing each other, by choosing to be seen, by choosing to believe that their story could end differently than everyone predicted. The ranch spread around them in the darkness, land that had been a grave and become a garden, a place of isolation transformed into a sanctuary. And in the center of it all, a family that had been stitched together from broken pieces and made into something whole. Mara stood, pulling Ethan up with her. "Come to bed. Tomorrow we start all over again, the feeding and the working and the living. But tonight, let's just rest in knowing we made it. We actually made it." "We made it," Ethan agreed. They went inside together, checking on sleeping children before retiring to their own room. And as Ethan fell asleep with his wife in his arms and his children safe under his roof, he thought about that first morning when Lily had appeared at his fence asking if he was sad. He'd been sad. So sad he'd forgotten how to be anything else. But that barefoot girl had led him to a woman in a hidden cabin, and together they'd built something from nothing. Built a family from choice and courage, and the stubborn belief that they deserved happiness. They'd been broken separately. They'd healed together. And that, Ethan thought as sleep finally claimed him, was the best story anyone could ask for.